Howdy, howdy. It is Friday, and that means it is time for the hashtag TQIF Friday Night Lineup. That is when we have a live Tex-Trek stream on YouTube. We have a live podcast talking about the latest episode or episodes of Star Trek, as is the case this week. And then later on, there will be some late night fun on the Starfleet Boy After Dark channel with Starfleet Boy and friends. So thank you, everyone, for not running out to the theater to see the Doctor Strange sequel movie and instead checking out Tex-Trek, where we're going to be talking about Strange New Worlds and the Picard Season 2 finale.
It's only like the biggest show ever.
It does seem to have a very warm reception among audiences, so we'll see where that takes it. But yeah, I see that we already have some people in the audience, so Dave, I think we should just go ahead and get started. I'm ready when you're ready.
Let's do it.
All right, I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
And this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 189th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we take a deep look at Star Trek, old and new, and proud members of the TrekSphere network. Tonight, we are discussing both Picard Season 2, Episode 10, Farewell, written by Christopher Monfette and Akiva Goldsman, and directed by Michael Weaver, and also Strange New Worlds Season 1, Episode 1, Strange New Worlds, original title there, teleplay by Akiva Goldsman, story by Akiva Goldsman and Alex Kurtzman and Jenny Lumet, and directed by Akiva Goldsman. So a lot of Akiva Goldsman in the credits this week.
For better or for worse, we're getting our Akiva.
Perhaps a little of both.
I think that's fair.
But yeah, so a very, very big show for us. If you're new here, we do this every week. We do a live podcast where we go beat by beat, storyline by storyline, breaking down episodes, discussing them in great detail. And in addition to that, we also love to hear the thoughts and opinions of our live audience. So if you're here live, please chime in. And this week we're talking about two episodes, Season 2 finale with Picard, so that's a big thing, season finale, and then a series premiere of Strange New Worlds and two full-length live-action shows. This is probably the biggest week for us ever, covering the new content, the new Star Trek shows.
And that's even and Strange New Worlds is arguably a show that kind of fans made happen, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, according to Akiva Goldsman, that was his idea. Like, before Discovery even aired, he wanted to do this Pike show.
Well, I told him to do it, and he did it.
Okay. They built that entire Season 2 of Discovery because Dave told them to.
Listen, I said I wanted Gorn, and I got Gorn, okay?
Or did you?
Sort of. We'll
Dave's
talk about that later.
favorite website is gornhub.com. But yeah, before we get into these episodes, though, I just want to let everyone know that we reached our goal on the YouTube side of things of getting past 800 subscribers before we talked about Strange New World. So thank you for helping us do that.
Hell yeah.
And if you're listening to the podcast, you might want to go ahead and subscribe on YouTube as well, because yes, we do the same show. We do it every Friday at 7 p.m., the same one that you listen to. However, we also do some additional streams from time to time, so you can check those out if you subscribe to the YouTube channel. And it shows us how much you like us and want to support us. So thank you for doing that. Cerulean Blue in our live audience is commenting on my Gorny joke.
We like to give the Gorn lots of screen time here.
Yeah, that was a whole thing in the Star Trek Online community. I think was the Gorn puns, but enough with that. We can chase that rabbit all night, but we're not going to. Instead, we'll talk about Star Trek Picard first. If you want to hear us talk about Strange New Worlds, we'll probably get around to that in about an hour 15 minutes. But yeah, we got to talk about this Picard season 2 finale first and wrap that up, and then we'll unwrap our new show, our Strange New Worlds. So, Dave, I'm going to recap Picard before I ask you what you thought about it. I'm just going to read the official synopsis for the episode, and then I'll kind of expand on it with spoilers to just give everyone a refresh on what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But the official synopsis reads, in the Season 2 finale, with just hours until the Europa mission, until the Europa launch, Picard and the crew find themselves in a race against time to save the future. And that really doesn't tell us much, but they are right down on the wire. The rocket is about to take off. They're able to stop Soong from killing Renee by having him kill Talon instead. A little switcheroo there. And then we get back to the 25th century, thanks to Q's final snap as he dies with his friend Picard present to witness his passing. And then we have a lot of crazy stuff in the 25th century with Agnes Borg Queens and with transwarp corridors and all kinds of nonsense, and probably a big setup for season 3. And then end with everyone having a toast in Guinan's bar and Picard maybe putting the moves on Laris, and maybe seeing where that relationship might go, or what it might develop into. But what was your kind of just broad impressions on this episode before we get in?
Father, you think that transwarp
specifics?
conduit is definitely a setup? You think it's Chekhov's transwarp conduit? I think it's just there.
I mean, that was a pretty big, like, just the scale of it was ridiculous. Like, it's
no, that's season 3 there. Whatever it is, species 5793 or whatever.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. I'm just the transwarp conduit. I'm just mumbling there. My opening thoughts on this episode. So in a lot of ways, the only thing that this episode had to do for me personally, because I've already had lots of big ups and downs with this season, was to do Q's finale right, and they did it. I think they did it. I might have wished for kind of more detail on exactly why he was dying, or maybe a deeper conversation with Picard. But like as an emotional, kind of teary ending to this rivalry that's really been going on since the dawn of Star Trek, Next Generation, Encounter at Farpoint, 1987. In that sense, it was very satisfying to me as a emotional conclusion to that. The rest of the episode was unfortunately kind of a clunky series of those sort of big finale movie ending sequence tropes. But I did sort of know to expect it. It's not wildly out of place with sort of the vibe of both Discovery and Picard when they kind of get down to their season finales. So I was able to enjoy it sort of for what it was. That said, I'm definitely ready for Strange New Worlds to, be bringing us more of those standalone plots that don't feel like they fray near so much as these long form plots. So it was nice to have that waiting in the wings too. But overall, I was pretty happy with this episode.
Cool. It was another mixed bag for me, kind of like last week, even though I mostly liked last week's episode, but same thing as here. There's a lot of stuff I like. There's some stuff that I wish was done better. But multiple moments in this episode were particularly touching for me. It helps that most of what I didn't like was just all stuff in the first 15 minutes. and then after that, it's like the stuff that I did like. So it kind of helps, get that out of the way first, and then get into the stuff I enjoyed more. The season finale, I guess, did its job as far as wrapping up some of the storylines. There were a lot of conclusions that I found satisfying. There were some that I found disappointing, and some I just didn't really care about one way or the other. But I think the episode has put all the pieces on board in the position where whatever they're going to do in season 3, they're ready to go do that, which we've been told is going to be a lot of starship action and have all of the Next Generation actors, all of them are showing up. So yeah, that's cool. I guess that's exciting. That's something to look forward to. But yeah, season 2 was kind of a unique thing. It started off with like a lot of promise. There is so much enthusiasm. It was kind of weird to see just the entire fandom galvanized and cheering for this show. And then about halfway through the season, people were kind of getting, bored with it or losing interest. And it was crazy how much of like a 180. And then I think, here at the finale, which I don't think it was a bad finale. I think there were parts of it that were better than other parts. But like I said, I was mixed on it. But yeah, I don't know if it like turned around, if it like was able to do enough to like win people back over. So if you're in our audience, let us know. Were you happy with the season? Were you disappointed with it? Are you still excited for season 3?
Right. That's always kind of a question. Is like if you stick the landing, will it leave you essentially walking out of the theater with good feelings, even if like a sort of a notable chunk of the middle you were pretty meh on or even disappointed with? And so it seems like I've mostly been seeing people responding pretty well to this, but it was a fair amount of some of the same frustrations people have hit during the season.
Well, let's go into our episode breakdown, where we're going to carve the episode up, kind of almost scene by scene, and talk about it in much greater detail. But yeah, we'll start with the opening on the chateau, where Picard's talking about like, oh, these are like the same bullet holes I grew up with as a child. So, our chateau got shot up pretty bad in the 21st century, I always heard.
There's nothing like the nostalgic bullet holes.
But we have Talon has to go on her mission to save Renee, and we have the cryptic riddle from the Borg Queen, which really annoyed me. I don't know why she just wouldn't tell them.
Yeah, you have to come up with a fan explanation for it. The show gives you no reason for it.
But the notion of one Renee must live and one Renee must die, and what the hell does that mean? And Talon figures it out, and Picard figures out what she's gonna do. With a like quick little moment between them where she's just like Picard later, because he doesn't want her to do the self-sacrifice, but. Yeah, she gets them back to her apartment and then tells them, okay, you all of y'all go stop Soong, stop his drones. He has what do they call it? His remote capabilities. He has some powerful remote capabilities they have to go neutralize. And then
Picard, I forget what the exact term was.
Picard, what would you say? He stowaways on her transporter beam to the launch pad.
Yeah, he does the equivalent of jumping in at the last minute. It's not the equivalent. He literally jumps in and gets on board. Like
Gillian Taylor and Kirk in Star Trek 4.
Exactly so.
But yeah, we should talk about the stuff at the rocket launch, and then the stuff at Soong's. I don't really have much to say on the Soong stuff, stopping the drones.
Real quick, Fatheree, about the bullet holes. They do at that point say, oh, does this mean we're lining up with the timeline? Does this mean that is this a good sign? Or, I think Rios asks about that, and, nobody knows. They're exactly how it all fits together from the alternate timeline to the will history happen or not, and does it matter because we're already in an alternate timeline? Is also a little bit of a shaky thing. I'm sure
it is. It's very shaky because they have like a different Guinan who doesn't remember meeting Picard in that Next Generation episode in the 1800s in Time Zero, parts 1 and 2. So the explanation we were given for that was that it was because, this is the timeline that has the Confederation future, so that time travel stuff didn't happen. But the bullet hole thing, which is a product of time travel, like that was something that like always happened. So, or are these just, is it starting to shift into the correct timeline? And
right, like some kind of Back to the Future I think it almost has to work that way because them getting Renee to the ship is to fix the main timeline, right? They're not trying to make sure, that the Confederation time. I mean, like
They're trying to prevent that.
They're trying to prevent the Confederation timeline
by
right?
having Renee's solution to climate change instead of Soong's is what's going to determine if it becomes the Confederation Earth or the normal Federation Earth.
Right, right. Weirdly specific, but yeah. But yeah, that's one of those things where, like, this is why single episode plots as we get to Strange New Worlds, hopefully, will be really tight and concise and not have all these frayed ends that you can very easily pull at and cause things to unravel.
I don't like that excuse either, though, because a lot of shows do serialized storytelling well. Like, there's no reason why they can't do that in Star Trek.
It's true, yeah. It's either... I don't know whether to call it, laziness. Are they just... are they more into, so kind of obsessed with the character beats and drama that they let internal logic fall apart? I don't know. I can't know. But yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah, it might be like a priority thing, but I think that's kind of true in general. A lot of times these days, is people are a lot more obsessed with the creating those like big emotional moments, and there is kind of a less focus on things like your plot integrity or like narrative structure and story logic are kind of all secondary concerns.
Yeah, I do think, broadly speaking, though, you're right. Like, it shouldn't be, oh, it's long format, that's just going to happen. That's not true. Plenty of shows do it without that happening. So,
and I'm sure it is trickier in science fiction when, like, time travel is not something that happens regularly, and so you kind of have to just make up your. I'm sorry, my dog is gonna be loud. Sorry about that for the live audience.
Quiet that targ down. But what were we saying, Fatheree, about long format shows? Oh, you were saying time travel and stuff is like its own special complication, and that's true. But I hope
going to
they
be something you have to invent.
Up.
It's something you're going to have to invent yourself, and so it's not going to necessarily like naturally lend itself to having like a strong logic to it, because you're just literally just pulling stuff out of a hat. And I mean, not literally, figuratively, I guess. But
sure. You'd think with all the time travel Star Trek had done that they'd have like tighter rules for it, but
sometimes they do it really well. Sometimes Star Trek does time travel stories that are like very consistent with like their rules, and then sometimes they do them where they're kind of just all over the place. I've seen Star Trek do both.
Yeah. At this point, I'm just hoping that season 3, as they wrap things up, will be tighter than this as far as its internal logic.
But do you have any thoughts on like the infiltration of Soong's house to like stop his drones? Because it just felt like something for the 3 characters to do. Rios, Raffi, and Seven, like give them something to do while
sort of like Picard and who was it? Picard and Guinan's FBI questioning a few episodes ago, which ultimately didn't
with Agent Wells that didn't turn out to. The only thing he did was like let them go.
Yeah.
Well, he was also the guy who arrested them, so...
I think they thought that was going to feel like more of a big emotional beat than it was.
Yeah, I thought that might pay off. I thought he might do something here to help them in the finale, but he didn't.
He's got his special FBI agents at Chateau Picard to fight Borg troops. But I did expect something like that to happen. This actually would have been a case for that to happen. Like, they could move fast enough to move on Soong's house and close off that plot point. But you're right. They wanted the people to kind of have stuff to do, and it was all sort of this is the part where it sort of started feeling like action movie by the numbers stuff, and it was fine. Like we know Rios is a good pilot. He got to do a cool good pilot thing. Raffi got to kind of be the tech person on the scene. It was exactly fine.
But Rios, I guess, gets one final cool moment for his big send-off where he's the one actually like piloting the drone to take out the other drones. But yeah, other than that, it was just there to give them something to do. But with the Picard stuff with Soong there at the site. I was really curious how the hell did Soong get from France to the United States so quickly with no passport?
Hmm, it's a good question.
And even if he had like a flight already booked, that's a long flight.
He had a genetically modified flight, Fathery, obviously. It was a eugenics plane of some sort. Uh, yeah, yeah, I don't know. Does
He
he
has
have?
like tunnels that go like through the center of the earth or something to like get around quickly.
He hasn't been shown to like sneak any transporter technology into use, right? That's not something he's messed with at all during this.
I mean, the Borg Queen had transporter tech when she hijacked the transporters on La Serena.
Yeah, it's another one of those things. Like you could probably come up with an explanation
No, you
for
can't. That
like a
it's a
one-off.
really hard one to come up with an explanation for.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that particular one, but oopsie. Um,
But I did like the scene with Talon and Picard when she's telling him, "You're not gonna try to save me. I don't need saving. I'm gonna go do this myself if that's what I want to do." And when I watch this a second time, he clearly knows what she's already planning. Like, oh, she's going to disguise herself as Renee and die because he's not at all caught off guard when we have that big reveal later.
yeah, I guess my thought was that he was putting it together before her imager, whatever would be called, before it changed. But like I guess I didn't assume that he knew it here, not precisely. Probably that she was going to do something sacrificial, but not that he precisely knew. But maybe that would sort of make sense. Had she changed her look before on the show?
She had shown him that she can do that to hide her Romulan ears.
Ah,
So
right,
he
right.
he knew that she had the tech to do that. But she also tells them, not to feel guilt over other people dying. That when it's a result of their own actions, you don't have to
Right.
absorb all that blame like you did
This
with
is
your
actually a
mom.
key thematic scene, and in that sense I liked it because it's good for Picard's growth. It's something that we like. We so often see heroes in like kind of larger than life action movies, superhero movies, and kind of action oriented sci-fi that they do very often have a person who, usually the hero who feels so responsible for someone that this guilt hangs over them, and if they can't save everybody, and but it also is like a stand-in for kind of almost any form of like putting too much on your plate. People who are workaholics, who overstress themselves, overwork themselves. Picard, it's in a way it's like him hiding kind of from himself, and also not letting people have agency in a weird way. And so I liked the conversation, even if it's a little on the nose as far as like here is the lesson.
What did you think of the conversation between Talon and Renee when she kind of reveals herself finally after this whole life of being the guardian angel?
You know, several of the times they interacted with Renee, I thought, boy, if I were Renee, I would be freaked the shit out by a lot of this stuff. I would be like, oh well, if I believe in this, I don't know. I don't know if I could process it. Um, I guess what happened is we didn't see the culmination of this. They did a little fake out with the audience where we thought Renee goes running out and panics and runs into Soong. But in fact, what must have happened in there is a few more minutes of conversation in which she was like, okay, what's going to happen next?
Right. It was a
Right?
pretty good like switcheroo kind of trickery
Yeah.
to your
I've,
audience.
yeah, I've seen movies and stuff do that pretty well, going as far back as going after Buffalo Bill's base in
Oh
what do you call
yeah,
it? Silence of the
yeah.
Lambs.
Don't
They
spoil it if people haven't seen that. But
Right, yeah, it's a
that's a
neat bit
good
of
example.
visual kind of trickery that's pretty satisfying. But anyway, um, I thought it was almost not. It made sense to me that at the end, as you're about to do this thing you're about to do, that she would want to have this contact. It also seemed logistically or like logically foolish because if Renee had panicked or freaked out and had not had the reaction she did, she would have completely fucked everything up.
Well,
Um,
I think what made it work particularly well was Orla Brady's performance here. And
Yeah.
sometimes, even if there is like a little bit of like wonky logic in your dialogue, if you have an actor who's just like acting their ass off, they can make you believe that it makes sense. But I think it does, kind of make sense here that
Well,
the,
it totally makes sense for her on an emotional level. She's literally been this person's guardian
right,
for so
and
long.
Renee is smart enough, that she when Talon tells her things like, you have caught glimpses of me a couple of times. I was the one who gave you this little necklace thing when you wrecked your boat at 10 years old off of Martha's Vineyard. Yeah, I was there at your mom's funeral. I saw you put the spaceship in her casket. You just saw me at the astronaut gala 2 nights ago or whenever. So Renee does buy into that, and then what does she say exactly? Right now your life depends on trusting me, and then we
Hmm.
don't see what's said after that. We just see like Soong walking over there. It kind of cracks me up when you see sneaky Picard hiding behind a pillar, like spying
90,
on Soong. It's just,
90-year-old man. In the
yeah,
video game, it'd be the stealth portion of the game, but you'd be moving at a snail's pace.
it's not just Star Trek, but like anything Patrick Stewart is acting in, he puts like so much effort. Like he's always doing something. If you watch like his face or his body
Mm.
language, he's always trying to convey something. And
Yeah.
so when he tries to convey sneaky, he looks sneaky. I mean, he just he takes like all his work he's doing very seriously and gives it a lot of effort, I guess.
By the way, I didn't notice it until the second time I saw it, but I did like the thing. It was an obvious visual symbol when Talon said, "I've been your guardian angel," and she tapped her mission patch that had the little wings on it.
Oh,
Yeah, you
I
have
didn't
the
notice
shot
that.
right. If you just go back a few shots, Father, that's the shot.
Oh,
She's
okay.
tapping. She taps it right there, and it's just a neat little visual on it. But yeah, I think that's all I've got to say about that. She did do a very good job, and I thought like because those scenes have to be kind of hasty, that and her demise in just a few
Yeah.
minutes, she put a lot of work into making them work.
Yeah, and a lot of actors they like to chew the scenery when they get like these big important dramatic moments, like a death scene is a big one. But she didn't like ham it up like the way Brent
No,
Spiner kind of hams up being a villain. She made it really really emotional and really touching, and um it did kind of freak me out. I was like, "Oh, is Renee poisoned by Soong now? Are they gonna have to do like some time travel thing where now they're gonna have to go back in time and create like a secondary timeline where this doesn't happen? Is that why like one dies, one lives? Is that what's gonna go on?" Like, I was really confused when they're watching the rocket go up, and then we have the reveal that it is Talon and Orla Brady like crying. They might have like CGI'd her eyes to make them like more red. I think that was like to show off the neuropoison or what,
I
or
just thought it was
neurotoxin.
like
But
contacts or something. But
oh, maybe.
yeah,
But
she seemed like someone who was really losing strength, and
yeah,
so
like it
it
wasn't quite Spock in engineering dying from radiation in Wrath of Khan, but like you still get that same kind of impact. Like, oh yeah, like this person, they do seem like they're losing it. The life is just like draining out of their face before our very eyes.
Yeah, she did that sort of minimalist acting thing pretty impressively. No heavy emoting. This is not meant to be a Shakespearean scene. This is meant to convey something of a person whose energy is about to leave their body.
Fun will now commence, in our live audience liked this also. They're saying, I like the way that Renee, in quotation marks, fooled Soong here. Yeah, and it fooled the audience too, so you'll buy that even like a smart person like Soong would fall for it.
If I can be tricked, Soon can be tricked.
And again, here like Picard's reaction, he's never like, "Oh my God, Renee!" Like he
Right.
knew as soon as he sees her like stumbling around poisoned, he knew what was going on. I think, but the dialogue from her when she says, "The secrets we keep are worthless. Don't die without telling people you love them." And I thought that was kind of cool, and also kind of ties into the lesson I guess Q is trying to teach Picard. Um,
Right.
but uh, but yeah, and I don't know. You have anything else to say on Talon or any of the Europa mission stuff in this episode?
I think that Akiva Goldsman as a writer is a very kind of sometimes very on the nose about his themes, and this is the episode where it culminates. It's arguably the time when you can be a bit on the nose. So her kind of speaking those words to Picard right when he needed to hear them, and yet as she's dying, conveniently not bothered by anybody in this what would could potentially be a much more bustling place. I mean, I know they're probably off in a storage room or whatever, but still. Um, you know, it's I will say this, for me that's not the kind of thing that bothers me. It, like, in the back of my head something is just like, okay, this is a bit contrived, but it's contrived in a way that I like, because I you know, as someone who likes the episodic format, one of the things that happens in episodic television is things are even a little bit more contrived, and so if it moves the story along in a way that I like, I'm generally on board it, and I thought they did a good job.
Yeah, if it's satisfying.
Right.
Um, yeah, and again, you know, I like that there actually is a theme and a message to the season, because sometimes they tell like these long serialized stories, and I'm not really sure what it was all about. Like
We should be
season
nicer
two
to AI.
season 2 of Discovery, I'm told, was about faith versus science, but I'm not sure how. But but yeah, the season 2 of Picard, you know, say what you will about it in terms of quality or if you liked it or not, but it does have a very clear theme and a clear message, and I think when it is trying to focus on those aspects, it actually that's actually when some of the best moments of the show occur. But yeah, I guess if that's all we have on Talon and Renee, we can talk about Corey and her uh, destruction of Soong's data. He's just like not having a good day. He thought he was going to become like like the most famous scientist in human history, and instead he messes up the the mission to stop Renee. He gets all of his data deleted by his teenager. That's Zoomer beats Boomer, I guess, when it
Yeah.
comes to
He's going to
keeping
have to
his
do that thing
computer
where he's
files.
like, "Could you show me how you reboot this?
Yeah, yeah,
How does can
she's
I pull this up
outsmarted
on
him.
my phone?"
But I thought this is actually like I have complained about some of like Brent Spiner's performance in this season. I think here is actually some of his best stuff, though. You do like kind of buy into the just how defeated he is. He was really
Yeah.
good at conveying that, and um, you know, of course, we get the big Easter egg here that was so melodramatic, and you might even say overdone. But what was your reaction to the Project Con folder he pulls out of his desk?
I think it was a minor groan for me because like I was trying to think, are they literally? I mean, they had tied him to eugenics projects
Hmm.
already, so that, like, it's not like they hadn't laid the seeds for this. I was even wondering about that possibility that essentially the Cold War eugenics wars had already happened, but I'm like, there's always been that weird bit of the naming convention, you know. I think that was what was it was a Roddenberry thing, I know, of Khan Noonien Singh versus Doctor Noonien Soong, and I'm like, I guess they want to formally tie those together, but I don't particularly know why.
I
Like,
don't know
nothing
if
is
I don't know if they're tied together because like one of
just
this
the
guy's
weirdest of coincidences.
I mean one of this guy's descendants is going to be named Noonian, and he's involved with the Noonian here 400 years earlier.
Well, isn't it like Oh, I guess that's right. Khan isn't about to like rise up immediately, right?
Well, I think what they're actually doing, and I'm marrying this with some lore that was expanded in Star Trek Strange New Worlds that we'll talk about later. But yeah, they reference the eugenics war there as well. So I think we're officially retconning the eugenics war as not having happened in the 90s. It's part of the lead up to World War III. And there's actually a few examples within canon already that kind of make it sound like it happened in the 21st century, not the 20th century. Just like references to people saying things like 300 years ago, and it's like, oh, shouldn't that be closer to 400 years ago? And, you know, stuff like that. So, um, Deep Space Nine, The Wrath of Khan, and Enterprise, there's just these are examples I can just think of off the top of my head. All kind of make it sound like the eugenics war might have happened in the 21st century. So this old school file that comes out of a filing cabinet. I don't even know if like some people like probably might be unfamiliar with filing cabinets because everything's like digital now, right? But
maybe, yeah.
but this is the one thing that Corey couldn't get to because this wasn't digitized.
I mean, that is
it was
the
on
premise
paper.
of it, yeah.
But yeah, it's dated June 7th, 1996. So I think now we're saying like maybe that's like Khan was like created in 96. So he would be, he'd be like in his late 20s at this point. He'd be like, probably coming into his like prime of his ambition and ready to go, F some stuff up. But
what about you, Father? Broadly speaking, when you saw it, what was your reaction?
I was okay with it. I was more okay after. I had seen Strange New Worlds first before this, but thinking of how we might be reframing the eugenics war as having. I've always been kind of on the Greg Cox side of things. We're like, oh, it's like the Greg Cox novels that happened in the 90s and it was all covered up. That's why we still see like a picture of the Botany Bay back in Voyager when they came back in time to 1996. But I guess now we're just saying that, oh no, it happens as part of the lead up to World War III. Somewhere between the Second American Civil War and World War III, there's a eugenics war. So, just the fact that we got both those episodes the same day, it actually is like, well, this is more official confirmation. Seems like a little bit of franchise synchronicity. So I was kind of okay with it, even though it was a little too like, dun dun dun, it's Project Khan.
That's so
Khan!
Father, that's so Akiva.
Very, very Akiva. So I don't have much else to say on that stuff, but I know, Dave, this was a particularly big moment for you, the introduction of Wesley Crusher for the first time since Journey's End, really, unless you count that tiny, you gotta pause the DVD and like look in like the left corner of the screen, you can barely see Wesley Crusher for like a little bit in Nemesis. But yeah, this is pretty much the first time he's actually like had a scene since Journey's End. When was that, 93, 94, 1994?
Wow, that is wild that it's been that long. You say it's a big thing. It's mostly because I wanted him to appear in some capacity, and I felt that because he was as the Traveler, it was actually it'd be something very easy to work into either potentially Picard. I thought it might be more likely to show up in season 3, or that is to say, season 2 of Picard as opposed to season 3. I thought he could still show up, even though they'd said Wesley wouldn't be there because the Traveler would be there. But I like, it's another one where I thought it was like a little on the nose. Like, I'm not quite sure where they
wanted.
What do you
mean on the nose? Like,
well, that is to say. Well, I don't quite know what plot point it served, but it tied up. It gave you, the organization, which sometimes they call Aegis, the Gary 7 organization, the Talon organization.
Yeah.
It gave them a connection to, a formal connection to the Travelers. They are the Travelers. I actually kind of didn't like their explanation of their sort of universal policing / meddling. I don't know why. It kind of. I've been bugged by this since 2001, and the notion that the aliens in that gave us our ability to like kill to save us, because I'm like, I always feel like our mistakes and our triumphs need to be our own and not the result of somebody kind of quietly tricking us into doing things right or wrong. So I actually don't love that premise. But it's not that I actually think we're going to see tons and tons of instances of the Travelers doing lots of deeds. So practically speaking, it doesn't matter too much. And I think it was a pretty clever thing to do. And I liked seeing Will Wheaton, right? That was something I wanted to see. I wanted to see Wesley Crusher kind of happy and cool. And, arguably he was acting a little more Will Wheaton than Wesley. But that's fine.
But he could also be, thousands of years older than the Wes we saw before.
That's true. They have, I guess, these sort of spanning abilities. What about you, Father? Were you, and I had predicted that he might show up, so I was excited for me on that level.
I liked it. I think this is a better use for him than trying to shoehorn him in with whatever the hell is going on in season 3. 'Cause it sounds like that's already going to be a crowded show to the point that it pushed most of the Picard regulars off.
Also, the power level of the Travelers is kind of high. You sort of want probably the crew to be, in some way, the underdogs, right? They need to be the underdogs of whatever the situation is. And so having a traveler in your corner is almost a little
Yeah,
might be
like
too
why do you
much.
need why do you need Geordi and Riker and Worf and Troy and Crusher when you could just have like this god boy Wesley show up and like fix it all for you? So
Although that said, if they're the travelers also just for all their power, they dispense agents like Talon, who's not godlike, and who just died. um, so they're not, their resources don't seem to be infinite, or they don't seem to use them. They don't seem to unleash that full power that often. By the way, I was also happy for Corey. Not a character who I think was like a super standout character, but she got dealt a hand of cards, and so her having something to look forward to, something to maybe be excited about, that's a good deal.
yeah, Andrew Hayes in our audience, he's asking, is Nemesis Wesley canon? Or he's asking if it isn't canon. It is canon because it is on screen in an officially released show or movie. But the scene of him talking about, oh, I'm going to be a junior officer on the Titan, that's a deleted scene, so that part is not canon. And when I saw Will Wheaton at Star Trek Mission Chicago recently, he was talking about how he's so glad that's not canon because he was talking about how, like, in his mind, Wesley is the traveler. He's basically like a Time Lord, and he goes anywhere in time and space that he's needed to help, protect the universe and maintain the timeline and all of this stuff. And it's all stuff that shows up here, in this one little scene where the character is basically explaining all this stuff to Corey in the recruitment speech. Oh, and I love that line where he gives her like the ultimatum, like you can live a perfectly ordinary life, or you can come with me and explore the whole universe, but I cannot guarantee your safety. I just love that, like, he throws that in there. Just it made it feel more real, that it
He
has like
gave her
that
the
danger.
he gave her the Morpheus thing.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's like the red or blue pill
He's about to
thing.
show her how deep the rabbit hole goes, which that's pretty cool.
And
Uh,
I think this is the last we're going to see at Issa Briones. They said that she's not coming back in season 3. Evan Evagora is not going to be in season 3. We get the final Elnor scene later on here, and we're also not getting any more Rios or Jurati.
I wonder if they wanted to do a travelers show, the Gary Seven show that Roddenberry once upon a time wanted, stealth piloted.
Assignment Earth.
Yeah, if stealth piloted into Star Trek, then you could have, as anchors, Will Wheaton, Issa Briones could come back if she wanted to, and you would have the playground of, I guess, the whole tapestry of the franchise's universe. It's not quite what I want out of Trek. I guess I don't want, like, Mission Impossible teams that
You don't want that, and the people writing the checks don't want. They've actually told them, like, we can't do an anthology show because we're not going to pay to like build like sets for like every different decade
right.
of the Star Trek timeline.
Well, I guess we talked about this a little yesterday, and a friend mentioned the animation possibility, and I will say
That'd be the place to do it.
that'd probably be the place to do it, because then
That's how the studio executives are going to think about it. Like, oh, someone's just going to draw all of it. Like, we don't have to like build standing sets that we're only going to use one time. Then yeah, let's green light that.
even animation, if these days is which is likely to be 3D for something like this, would require they still have to build those digitally, and find clever ways to reuse them. They can't have like a different planet.
It's cheaper than doing it in
Right.
live action.
It'd be more viable. And I guess on that level, I think that would maybe be the funnest way to do it, would be to do it that way. But I'd be content to just have, like, this could be Wheaton's only appearance, or he could, like, in some ways show up once or twice, and advise, or, throw in whatever the threat is in season 3 could be bad enough that, maybe he can handle one godlike thing in it. I don't know.
Well, it's funny. This is the second Star Trek show this year to have a season finale with one of the characters talking about, like, oh, there's like this imminent threat coming. We had Kovich doing that at the end of season 4 of Discovery. We have Queen Jurati doing that here at the end of Picard, where for whatever reason she doesn't want to talk about whatever threat it is because she loves being cryptic. But yeah, maybe they are getting ready for like their big crossover that they're eventually going to do. I don't know, but I know that on the Ready Room for this last week, Akiva Goldsman and Alex Kurtzman talk about how the shows were all fighting over using Wesley Crusher. There were other shows that wanted to do something with him, and they decided, okay, he started on Next Generation, so Picard gets first dibs, and they used him here. I don't know. I don't know what other shows. I don't know if it was Prodigy or Lower Decks or Discovery or what. But they at least one of them wanted him. It sounded like more than two shows were fighting over it.
Interesting.
So possibilities there. We'll just have to be patient, and maybe we can wait and see. You ready to talk about the big Q stuff that you said was was the most important thing to you?
Heart of the episode.
But back at the chateau, they're trying to clean up the butterflies. Looks like Rios is happy with Teresa and Ricardo. Raffi and Seven are happy together. Seven's accepted her Borgness. She's okay with it. Raffi seems to... the two of them, they kind of seem to have found their equilibrium over, like, how close do we want to be, or do we want to do, like, long distance, or, like, am I crowding you, or am I not crowding you? And they seem to finally have figured out their balance with each other, and we get their first on-screen kiss. So I was complaining about that last week. Like, why don't they ever kiss?
Yeah, that is a little bit weird. Star Trek has certainly not been shy about being queer friendly in the last several years. But yeah, it's kind of a weirdly overlooked thing. And I will say this, like, I thought they did a convincing job of, we've talked about this before, of the first time between seasons, essentially they had their, was the majority of their relationship, and then they were kind of in a cooling period when this season began, and so we really only saw that. And I thought they played the post relationship, or like at least post intense relationship, where they just have to work together on a mission together, pretty well. Like, I was always buying it. I was never like, they don't even seem to fit together.
Yeah, they had really great chemistry.
I mean, honestly, Rios's stuff with the family that is about to happen felt much more kind of contrived to me. I don't hate it, but it didn't feel quite right to me. It just felt like it all happened so fast, a few days, and he changed his mind. Didn't feel quite right for one person who he effectively hasn't gone on a date with.
They got arrested by ICE together.
There, I kind of wish they had almost played that up a little bit more. Just that kind of bonding that happens under duress. They were also running from, like, Borg, I guess, commandos and stuff a little bit. Yeah, but yeah, Seven and Raffi pulled off the kind of, like, connection real quick, and it was not quite so believable with Rios.
Well, unlike everyone else, they get to come back for season 3.
That's what they get for having good chemistry.
The most emotional, before we get into everything with Q, but, like, the most, like, emotional thing in this whole episode for me, and it's, like, the hardest thing for me to watch.
Yeah,
was Picard, like, putting that key behind the brick, knowing that in the future his little kid self would take that key, and then it would eventually lead to his mom killing herself. But that was probably, like, one of the hardest things he's ever done in his life is doing that. But then, Q tells him, oh, that now that you've accepted that part of yourself, now that you've forgiven that little boy, now you can allow yourself to find romance. And that's what this whole season was about. I did all of this insane alternate timeline shit just to make you able to fall in love, so you don't have to die alone like me.
He didn't quite put it that way. I feel like he was a bit more eloquent about it, but that was the gist of it. Yeah, was he seemed to be a little bit more about being capable of being loved and finding connection. It felt less like he was like, I'm trying to set you up on a date, and more like, you have gotten to the place where you can do this in a way that you haven't been able to.
But all those Borg mercenaries got killed so that Picard would be able to have a girlfriend.
Don't think too hard about it. They were Blackwater mercs or whatever.
Yeah, I think they were going to die.
They probably
soon.
Committed atrocities in Afghanistan. So
I think they were going to die soon in one of these various wars of the 21st century.
Yeah,
so.
It was that or get killed by Khan.
But it was weird to me when Q talks about Talon, and he's like, "Oh, Talon dies in every timeline," but I'm like, don't all of us die in every timeline? Like, unless you're an immortal, like...
I think he must have meant that she died young, essentially. Died not of old age, but of some sort of protecting, probably, Renee. The dialogue should have cleaned that up. It would have been nice if he had actually just said she dies protecting Renee in every timeline.
But he says this was the best
But this time
one.
she got to meet her.
Right, yeah, so it was the one that was going to work out best for her. But he confesses that he cares about Picard. Even gods have favorites, and Picard is one of his favorites.
Yeah, this was the scene where I teared up. I mean, how could you not? Because and like, all right, if you're not enjoying the episode at all, I guess like anything is going to seem like schmaltzy or whatever. But to me, this was like I was watching this with the eyes of someone thinking about decades of history between these actors, these characters, the sort of meta context of it all. Likely the last time, almost certainly the last time they will act together.
I wouldn't be sure about that, but.
Okay, maybe last major scene. I don't know. You don't generally do a farewell and then revisit it, but yeah, Q has always been such a goddamn pain in the ass, and sometimes outright villainous, right? People died when he introduced them to the Borg.
People died in season 2 of Picard.
Right, and there is a sort of I guess a weird truth about a lot of genre fiction, which is to say, if it's not our main characters, we don't care. And I know that sounds harsh, and maybe Star Trek should be a little bit better about that. But there were so many episodes of the original series that began with a whole planet being scourged or a colony being wiped out, and you're like. You don't
it's
linger.
Different if someone that you're friends with is directly responsible for it, though. I think, right?
Maybe so. But emotionally, like Picard, Q is a character that I didn't always like. I, oftentimes disliked him when I was growing up. I kind of found him to be kind of just insufferable, and I wanted sort of more serious plots. But I kind of came to enjoy it and enjoyed Delancey's performance and all that stuff. So that the notion that over time that this was, all of this was, kind of almost a bit of the fan joke. He was secretly in love with Picard. There's some sense of that's true, clearly. He cared about him. He picked his favorite. And, it doesn't make him... It can't make up for those completely in a way, but in the same way that I can find that in, Star Wars and Return of the Jedi, that I could feel like Darth Vader redeemed himself to his son, at the very least, in the eyes of his son. I can feel like Q redeemed himself in the eyes of Picard, or at the very least they made a human connection which Q would not have been able to do but for all his interactions with Picard over the decades.
Yeah, I just thought it was weird that to me it doesn't match what they set up earlier in the season, where you have the deranged Q who slaps Picard and he's all ranting about this is a penance and all of that stuff, where he did seem more overtly villainous. And a bit reminiscent of early Q when he was more menacing in the first couple seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation. And to me, it doesn't really match here. And so whenever I'm watching season 2 of Picard in the future, because I'm always rewatching Star Trek, I'll watch this many times. As long as I'm alive, I'll be rewatching Star Trek. It's always going to feel awkward and weird and
Well, let me throw out a notion, Fatheree. This is something that is this is a fan theory. This isn't, it's not in the text. You have to kind of add it in there. But I kind of like the notion that in his panic over dying and dying alone, he didn't quite know what he was doing. That is to say, early on he was angry at Picard and he thought he might torment him, but on subconscious level he was also doing this for him. And that's maybe why people died and why it wasn't this neat, clean thing, was because Q is an imperfect god and he was wrestling with his own emotions all the way up until the end. And only kind of in the end, when he realized he had maybe been subconsciously leading to this all along, did he come to was he able to speak the truth and find his peace.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it'd still be weird that Picard was so quick to forgive him for Eleanor's dead, but I guess that's okay. I mean, I know it gets fixed at the end, but Picard doesn't know that here when he's hugging Q.
Yeah. He might have suspected.
But I did really like Q saying, "Oh, I just did all of this just to help you because I like you. Like, why does it have to be like everything has to be of galactic import with universal stakes and celestial upheaval?" But then they kind of undermine that later when they're like, "Oh my God, this is a galactic event if this thing goes off." So
That's when they get back in timeline and get stop doing that's when his manipulation, I guess, is kind of wrapped.
right,
Uh,
yeah, that was a season 3 thing, not a season 2 thing.
yeah,
But yeah, just it just felt that like that does kind of undercut something that you say just a few minutes earlier in the same
a
episode. That
little
was a
bit, a
little
little bit.
awkward. I kind of wish that they had done something with Q had like promised to bring Elnor back, and then the way he does it is by like leaving Rios behind, and
Mm,
just because like Q knew that would like work out better for everyone, and that way
right.
you
If
don't.
he had said something like, for all my power, I can't resurrect. I don't have the ability to resurrect him and get you there.
Yeah,
And then Rios would be like, "What if we didn't all go back?" And he'd be
yeah,
like, "Oh, oh,
and
oh
that would make
wow,
Rios seem
yeah."
like, and then Rios could be like, Picard, get back there, take care of my crew or something. Because it seems like he does kind of abandon his ship. I mean, he says like, "Oh, I was never at home. I never felt like I had a family or anything in the future." So I don't. Maybe he didn't really care about the Stargazer crew that much. He's like, "I like this woman and this boy I just met a lot more than my whole crew." So
Yeah, that I chalk up to sort of the clunky Akiva Goldsman style, which is to say that uh, trying to make all the pieces fit just doesn't always work. An individual scene can be like sort of work, but yeah, it's just like the pieces don't all fit great. I did, a little ways back in the comments, Fun Will Now Commence said it was good to see the gang being happy, and that is, I think, that is the gist of this scene. If it is broadly meant to be the moment when they were able to write things, they still got to have to go back and have a little action adventure finale, and set up this third season. Set up the third season. But this was about like people more or less getting what they want after going through a bunch of shit this season.
And I did like the emotion of the moment, the big moment of Picard, hugging Q and telling him like, "Well, you won't die alone." This final act of yours, and then the whole time, the whole season, you're kind of waiting for Q to do like the big like snap his fingers, and you get like the white flash across the screen. So it was kind of fan servicey in a fun way when it's like, "Yay, he's
Well,
gonna do the
yeah,
thing, he's gonna do the thing," and then he does it.
yeah, it's essentially arguably that was his death and his final sort of gift was, and of course Q would do it with a bit of flourish and style. He's gotta like show one last time I'm the showman.
Yeah. Although I do expect he will somehow show up in season 3 of Picard. I think maybe we might see like the death of Picard in season 3, and then he'll like be there with Q somewhere in the Great Beyond or something like that.
Right, he did. Is that what his final words were? Something he's like, "I'll see you out there," or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, yeah.
So
I could see that being satisfying. That would be one of the few ways I could see that you don't undermine his ending with that.
are you ready to say goodbye to 2024 and to go back to the 25th century?
Yep, yep. Let's do the slightly hokey action sequence.
I'll say this though, when they got back to the 25th century, I didn't think any of this stuff was hokey. I mean, it felt like, oh my god, this is like so fast paced. Like there's so much stuff going on. Like, what did you say? What was that line of dialogue? What are these ships doing? But just like seeing like spaceships do things in space and like very clearly like big special effects sci-fi stuff. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this feels so much more like Star Trek than
Oh, that's
the last
interesting.
8 episodes of the show.
I think I was like I was like trying to like parse a little bit of the internal logic there, which was I was like, wait, are these guys all gonna that quickly trust Seven of Nine taking command, them agreeing with the Borg, them continuing to allow their ships to be moved around by the Borg? I mean, I guess everybody picked up the anomaly on their scanners and stuff like that, so they knew that that was a
It
thing
was
that was
because of
happening.
Picard. That was the reason why they asked for Picard.
Right.
We get the reveal that I don't think surprised anyone of the Queen is Agnes Jurati, especially after last week's episode. We all knew this was coming. But she said, "Yeah, we needed you. We needed a friend." But also, the part she doesn't say is like, "Well, we needed a friend who was an admiral with like a bunch of authority," because like
Hmm.
Picard gives the orders for everyone to to fall in line here. I gotta say, like, I didn't really like the design of how she looks in the I,
It was a little bit of a weird reverse raccoon where she has like bright eyes instead of a dark mask.
But I like the character. I continue to like the character. Just my only annoyance is, why does she have to be so mysterious? Like, why did you even come onto the Stargazer with that mask on? Like, why didn't you just like show your face at the very beginning? People might have trusted you. Like, why do you have to like play everything up as a mystery and speak in these riddles and stuff?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I turned it over. I don't know. Like, I will almost have to like work to contrive a reason why that works in my head. And yeah, I don't have like an obvious. I don't have an obvious reason.
But Seven getting the field commission, I like that. They set that up last week when she said Starfleet, wouldn't take her when she wanted to join, and now Picard gives her, I guess, command of the Stargazer. It looks like, in her line to Jurati when she says, "Agnes, be brilliant," and then she says, "Always."
I was happy that she said that, because otherwise I felt like Agnes had kind of like, her personality had been more subsumed by the Borg, which was always that was kind of what the thing I didn't want to see is like, I like Jurati as a person. I don't want her to be more Borg-like. Although if there was clearly an indication that this
it
is honestly
through though, like I think her personality shines through.
She did. She kind of still had some snarky attitude. I sort of wish she had told Picard, or she had been able to say something like, "I found my peace," or whatever. I mean, I think somewhat clearly that is the case, but I think I wouldn't have minded hearing it vocalized that she's like, Agnes is definitely part of who I am and has, bettered who. I mean,
she calls him Mister. I think that.
Yeah, that was fun.
I think that was that was meant to represent that. But I just like the visuals, like all these great ship designs and stuff that I liked in the first season, and so
those are all like different ships, right?
Yeah, unlike the copy-paste fleet from Season 1 that I bitched about endlessly 2 years ago. But it's not that complicated what's going on here. She just needed like a shitload of ships all harmonizing their shields together to stop like this big burst of energy through this anomaly that was going to show up. And I guess she thought this is like the best way to like get all the ships together. And we see Elnor is back alive on the Excelsior, so hi Elnor, and now everyone say bye Elnor because we know he's not going to be in Season 3. What I thought was kind of cool at first, and then I thought about it a little bit more, and I'm like, oh, that's actually not cool. But there's all these shots like different planets where you can see the strange anomaly lighten up the sky, and even like a shot of a crowd of people, including an Endorian. You see the Endorian antennae like looking up in the sky at like this bright light. I was thinking like, oh wait, if these are like different systems, wouldn't they all be like light years apart? Like how are they seeing this? Like how would just like the speed of light would take years for them to even be able to like see the light from this. So that was kind of silly.
That's true. Are they? Do we think that's what it was, or are they just like part of a planetary system that just happens to be near to it?
I guess they could all be in the same system.
There are a bunch of different races. Yeah, that'd be a little bit odd.
But I don't know. Maybe this thing can accelerate the speed of light. It's so crazy and unstable. But when it calms down, its big space volcano eruption and literally like cools down to a cool blue instead of like a hot yellow orangey color. And now it's a transwarp conduit. But where does it go? We don't know. The Queen seems to know more. But Picard's even like, oh, you know more than you're telling us. But because she has to be cryptic and mysterious, all she says is, I want to be in the Federation, and I'll stand here as the guardian at the gate. So, okay. I don't know why you just don't tell people what's going on, but
maybe that's what happens when you have Borg and human people so closely merged, is that the Borg become crazy riddlers.
But she says it is something threatening. It is tied to a threat, so...
Yeah.
It's the conspiracy bugs. They're coming back from Season 1 of the Next Generation. They're gonna be crawling into people's brains and making them eat worms.
Wouldn't be completely against it, although as long as I don't get like another evil Starfleet out of it. But if they did it, it wouldn't be too weird for me.
I like the joke that you came up with, Dave, of all these admirals are getting together, and one of them's like, wait, are you an infiltrator? Are you one of the conspiracy bugs? Oh my god, this is so embarrassing. I'm a changeling. I shapeshifted as an admiral. And then this other one is like, oh really? Oh, I'm actually a Romulan in the Tal Shiar.
I'm actually a salt vampire. This is so weird.
I'm a Klingon that's been like augmented to look like a human. I also infiltrated. It's like everyone's like just a Starfleet infiltrator.
Yeah, yeah. They haven't had the best security at times.
But I don't know. Do you have anything else on all the big starship action?
I don't think so. I thought it was one of those things that was like, in movies everything has to be last minute. That's kind of the style. They sort of pull from the action elements, the adventure elements of Trek movies. But yeah, why did the Borg Queen, have to do this, say, moments before it opened? Could she have perhaps done it 6 months before, years before? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it could be like she just found out about it, I guess. But it seems
Yeah.
like they were like waiting for all those ships to arrive for a while in the first episode. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I see that they've just are calling the Borg Queen the Gerber baby look in the comments, and
Well, that's
I'm
not a very
afraid.
flattering look.
I'm
for
afraid.
the,
Yeah, it is.
the
It's
the
not.
beautiful Allison Pill. But I mean, even I don't think she has to be like glamorized all the
That's
time.
the
But
thing.
I think it is just like it is kind of an awkward look when she takes the hood off.
Yeah.
I didn't think the design was
Yeah,
great.
it just didn't. You're right. It just didn't feel like one of their strongest designs, and maybe that one was some sort of time limitation too that they didn't get to tweak.
And then
that
it also
much.
looks weird that she's just like standing there at the front of the bridge and not really doing much. She just kind of stands there and stares. So
Right. She's an awkward guest, making
Yeah.
everybody kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's weird. But yeah, this is the last we see of her. I like the broad strokes of the Jurati arc. I like her having like this very important position, and being
Yeah.
the one character who wasn't happy at the beginning of the season. She's found her home, so good on her. And let's talk about everyone meeting back up at Guinan's for a drink, and we get Whoopi Goldberg again.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we learned the fate of Rios. He died like he lived. He got his last breath was into a cigar, so he died like he lived. Kind of a weird Latino stereotype.
That's yeah. I think people wanted Kirk to go out that way rather than have a bridge fall on him.
Yeah,
But,
I had big issues with that.
But in this kind of quick recap, her telling it like it's a charming story is a little bit weird.
But he died doing like heroic stuff to help people,
Yeah.
and kind of like
Yeah. And I know it was like over medical supplies and stuff like that.
it was a bar fight for a good cause. That's a worthy ending. Cooler than how you or I will go out probably. So
I am actually planning to also have a bridge fall on me, so that's.
I can arrange that.
Oh my god.
Hey, we live in the United States. We
Our
have
infrastructure is
terrible
crap.
infrastructure. Yeah, there's
Just-
bridges falling on folk all the time.
Just go hang out for a bit.
But I did like seeing Whoopi. She doesn't really do much. We get like that toast though of everyone. I guess celebrating Elnor's first drink. Is that what's going on here? He didn't seem to take to the liquor very well. So I don't know.
They
I don't know
forced-
what he was drinking. Is it like Romulan Ale or Romulan whiskey? We have Romulan whiskey now too.
Yeah, don't know there. Yeah, doesn't seem like a big hit. They should have gotten him a Shirley Temple. I don't know, a space Shirley Temple.
We learned that the dumb little kid Ricardo actually grew up to be this really important scientist who saved the oceans and the skies right before nuclear war would devastate everything.
But yeah, ironic. Sometimes, Father, I know you haven't seen you haven't much seen the Fast and Furious movies, right?
I've not seen any of them.
They have a tradition that a lot of their endings, at least when I started watching them or after the fifth movie and later, that there's like they'll kind of gather together at like a barbecue or something like that, and everybody kind of like you see them spending the money from the heist, or the guy got the girl and they're busting each other's chops, but you can see they love each other and all that. Like everybody kind of gets a win in the last 5 to 10 minutes on these movies, and this felt a little bit like that, where like everybody had to have like sort of a happy ending. Even if it was a death by bar fight ending, a little much.
But I will say, like, they talk about how they expanded like their medical organization, Mariposas.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people remember me pointing this out, but way back in the first episode, when we see Seven on La Serena carrying medical supplies, there's a Mariposas butterfly logo on one of those containers. So that organization lives on to the 25th century.
Yeah, I definitely remember you mentioning that. Did we? Did
Because
we?
we saw that symbol at her clinic also.
Right. Did we see it before the timeline had changed? Like, it shouldn't have existed until
No,
now.
it was
Right?
on the prime timeline, unaltered La Serena in the first episode before they introduced the Confederation at all.
Okay, so it was always going to at least stretch into our present, whether pre-Q meddling and
Yeah,
all that.
yeah. I think Aaron either I saw that and then Aaron noticed it also, or he might have been the one to point it out to me. But yeah, we caught it long ago. Let's talk about that last moment, I guess, with Picard and the rebuilt solarium as Laris is getting ready to leave, and I guess Picard talks her into staying. He says, time can't give me a second chance, but maybe you can. And she seems to take kindly to that. They're like getting like physically close as the camera pulls away.
I liked the understated ending. This is in a case where there was like I thought too many of the happy endings for everybody. An understated ending with open possibilities and a clear intent behind it. She was smiling. That she was clearly, Picard was talking about getting his second chance with her, and she was smiling and giving him essentially the yes look and nod. And but I actually didn't need to see a kiss. It would have felt a little too contrived. They can, it's a lot to take in.
I think it would have been okay though, since they almost kissed in episode 1. It'd be because it's picking
Yeah,
up where
I
they left
suppose
off.
so. Um,
But I kind
yeah,
of like that because she or I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
well, I don't know if I really have like a thought to connect, but it's how I mentioned that Q said that you have opened up the capacity to be loved. That what I liked about that is that it almost feels cheesy if you just go and you just like make out with the first chick that you had a connection with recently, and you're like, we're together forever now. And I know that that's not what they're trying to indicate, but I'd rather it be subtle that Picard's journey, although he's gotten to that mental place, he still needs some time to feel it out. It feels more real to me.
It just it just needs to
That's what I
show us the
like.
possibility. It just
Yeah,
needs to show us like the option is there for him now, where he didn't consider it there
right,
previously.
right.
But I also like that when they were going to kiss, he's the one who like pulled away and kind of like annoyed
Hmm.
her,
Right.
understandably, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But so I like that it's not like Picard then can just waltz back in here and be like, you know what, actually, I do want to kiss you, and she's just expected to go along with it. I feel like this is kind of more fair to her. He kind of has to like earn it back with her.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's you can't just show up and kiss her like that sailor in the old World War II photo.
Well, do we now think that in that promo we saw for Picard season 3, where he's looks like he might be writing his name on wedding invitations. He's writing his name on some little letters that he's signing. Do
Yeah,
we think that he is sending out wedding invitations for that might
probably.
be like a year later, and now him and Laris are getting ready to tie the knot? That's what's going to bring everyone back together. The Troy Rikers are going to leave Nepenthe to come to the wedding, and Jurati and Worf and Crusher are all going to show up from wherever
I
they are.
mean, it's kind of obvious, but it makes sense. I'm honestly, I'm a little surprised that Akiva Goldsman, based on sort of his broad stroke style, didn't have them kiss. But yeah, I think that makes sense. I sort of wish that, like, in this far flung future, that weddings weren't maybe such a be all end all of love, and connection, that they could live together, and just that we might see some other types of relationships other than just like, hey, you win and you're officially done when you get married or whatever. But that's probably this being the movies, more driven by movie style tropes than TV tropes, I think.
I mean, people
Um,
get married on TV too. People have weddings
no,
on
I
TV
know, but
too.
like usually you would have more deeper explorations, and I feel like
Oh,
they have not gone with this
yeah.
sort of
I think it'll
depth.
be a time jump. I think it'll be like a year later.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I just and Picard is a traditional kind of guy. I can see him being that dude no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think
I don't
weddings are
mean
going to
this
go
is
out
like
of
some.
style.
This is not some anti-wedding sentiment. It's just that it feels a little like it's just
It's
kind of
probably
one more
it's not like
cliche.
a big commercial event in the
Or
25th
like,
century like it
oh
is
good,
now.
he's got a connection to her. To time for a giant ceremony with lots of French frills in it. I don't know.
Um, just one thing that really annoys me, in addition to like Agent Wells never coming back to do anything
hmm
important, but also like I'm very unsatisfied with the connection of Talon to Laris. I guess it really is just like, oh, perhaps she's a Romulan ancestor, and that's that.
Right.
Season 3 might do something like maybe season 3 will make Laris like go back in time to be Talon. I think that's a possible thing, and she's just like, I'm just gonna act like I don't know you when I get there. But other than that, I don't see any other explanation in the future. So I'm probably just gonna have to live dissatisfied with that, which is unfortunate. But
Yeah,
that's the way the cookie crumbles.
that's a frustrating one. That's a frustrating one. They thought to fix things like, oh, here's how why the Picards speak with an English accent and not a French
Yeah,
accent, but that kind of core plot point stuff somehow
yeah, it's
eluded
weird the
them.
things that they pick and choose to explain, or like how did Soong get back from Europe
Yeah.
so quickly? That's
I'm not a big behind the scenes guy, but there's a part of me that would like to know, yeah, like somebody to talk about what the writing room, how things developed, and reveal this at some point.
We do need to move on to Strange New Worlds, but I
hmm
have some quick Gorn eggs in this episode of Picard. Those are all of our Easter eggs, in jokes, and continuity connections that I like to point out. Before I go into that, though, Dave, did you have any final thoughts on this episode, Farewell?
Only that like if I'm doing these sort of big assessment of where does something leave me, and Discovery left me kind of down. This one, for all its frustrations, because of because broad strokes plot I was okay with, because Q scenes were great, because I liked seeing Wesley Crusher return, left me essentially on a pretty positive-ish note. And if I think about just the Q stuff, very positive. So I'll be decently looking forward to season 3. Remind me, what's the? This is not Akiva Goldsman's show to
Terry
run.
Terry Metalis.
Terry Metalis.
Yeah, Terry Metalis is like season 3 is Terry's vision.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let us hope that he is a little tighter with the plots than Akiva. What about you, Father? Any final thoughts?
No, just yeah, season 2 is a mixed bag for me. I find comparing it to season 1, I found it had higher highs and lower lows.
Mm.
I don't know which one I would prefer over the other, but yeah, I'm very curious to see the direction in season 3.
Right on.
But let's talk about some Strange New Worlds.
Oh wait,
Oh,
did
wait,
you
no, I'm sorry. I got the
Gorn
Gorn eggs. The Gorn eggs.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Khan Noonien Singh. We all know who he is. If you don't know, go check Memory Alpha. A big continuity connection right there that the Star Trek franchise can't seem to get away from sometimes.
Don't check Memory Alpha. Go watch Space Seed and Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, do that. If, 3 hours. It's a quick couple of things to watch. When Seven is scanning that weird anomaly in the Stargazer, she's talking about tri-quantum waves. I think that's only been mentioned one time previously in Star Trek, but that's from the Voyager episode Dark Frontier. That's actually something that happens in transwarp conduits. There's these tri-quantum energy waves. So good job on them for getting that right. Seems like a weird thing that you get right when you get a lot of other stuff wrong,
Yeah,
but they got
sure.
that one. The star charts that are on the view screen on the Stargazer, there's a lot of references to previously established systems. I don't have time to point them all out, but there's a lot of cool ones there. And then at that toast at Guinan's bar, it's actually playing that First Contact and Insurrection theme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
composed
that's
by
one
Jerry
of
Goldsmith.
one of the great pieces of music in Star Trek's history, which includes a lot of great music.
Yeah. Now, it is at long last time to discuss Strange New Worlds. And actually, if you're watching this on YouTube, what I think I'm going to do is, because I think Strange New Worlds is going to bring in a lot of new, curious eyes, I might just split this up and cut out a separate Strange New Worlds video. So you might be watching a version of this on YouTube that just starts right here, talking about Strange New Worlds. And if you want to see the rest of this podcast that included the Star Trek Season 2 finale talk, then you can also find that on the channel or listen to it wherever you get your podcast.
Oh yeah.
But I'm just going to talk about this premiere episode I'm going to recap it by reading the official synopsis, then we'll kind of expand on that with spoilers. But the official synopsis reads, when one of Pike's officers goes missing on a secret mission for Starfleet, Pike has to come out of self-imposed exile. He must navigate how to rescue his officer while struggling with what to do with the vision of the future he's been given. I was talking about in Star Trek Discovery, when he had a vision of what will happen to him in Star Trek the original series. I'm talking about this being like a good entry point for new fans. I think this is a good show to show them. It's like, here's an example of what Star Trek is, and it's a very like a modern and fresh show. But yeah, it's weird that we start off talking about like all of Pike's history and everything. But yeah, Pike knows he's doomed. He's gonna have like this what he considers to be this terrible future. However, he's having to go back into action to go rescue his friend and his colleague, his first officer, number one, or Una, from a very primitive world that's kind of a parallel of our modern day world. But we should each give our opening statement, kind of just express our broad impressions on the episode. I'll go ahead and do this one first, but
Sure.
Yeah, this is potentially, I think, the best place to introduce new fans to the franchise. I think it's just undeniably Star Trek to its core, the show that they're doing here. And there is a lot riding on this one. There is a high demand from the audience. There is a lot of people who wanted to see the Anson Mount show, who wanted to have serialized Planet of the Week adventures again. And a lot of people who were kind of unhappy with the reimagining of the 23rd century aesthetic in Discovery, so they're having to retool that. And I think they've succeeded on everything. This is pretty damn great. It's not perfect, but hardly anything. I mean, there's things I can nitpick in the Wrath of Khan. We were talking about that a second ago. So, but yeah, really, really impressive. I wish I could say it knocked my socks off, but I was actually kind of I kind of had high expectations going into this. It was a lot of the stuff I had heard, behind the scenes and things that they had officially announced that all sounded, like I wanted to hear. So I was really expecting something great. It fulfills a lot of the promises, like feeling like traditional Star Trek, but made today in 2022. And it, again, like I said at the beginning of Picard season 2, it is refreshing to see so much of the fandom on board and really, really hyped and excited. But I did say that about season 2 of Picard at one point, and then fans kind of turned on that show when its quality dipped. So hopefully that doesn't happen with Strange New Worlds. Hopefully they're able to maintain this and ride the high, and we get years and years of Pike on the Enterprise. But Dave, what about you?
Since the kind of new era of Trek launched with Discovery, and continued into Picard, with these two live action shows, I've still been pining the whole time. People have heard me do it many times here, for the series to break from that modern serial style format with its big bads and the kind of convoluted mysteries, to return to an episodic format, the same format that I think pretty much defined all Trek from the original series all the way up to Enterprise. So vast majority of its time in fandom. And I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so. It's such a positive response I've seen from people that, I don't know if it's just episodic or how much of it is like returning to, a TOS era sort of energy and vibe, which we did see from the Kelvin movies. Whatever their flaws, people liked that general vibe. But anyway, it clearly went over well. And like you, Father, it wasn't precisely what I imagined, but I think I can say I pretty much loved it. I like the surprises it threw at me, like Pike wrestling with his mortality as like a sort of a thematic of the first episode. I like the classic Trek trope of doing humanoid aliens and even of an Earth-like culture, which that's kind of a risk, that's with all your special effects, and they're very much like 21st century Earth. Interesting, but it worked. And I like the energetic style that it had from oh my gosh, who's the security officer? Leon?
Leon.
Leon? Is that how
Leon
you say?
Noonian Singh. Got
Yeah,
more Noonians. There's Noonians
right.
all over the damn place.
From her very quick thinking infiltration, where she asks Pike, like she's like permission to try something or whatever, to Nurse Chapel and the somewhat tongue-in-cheek chase on the Enterprise. But I think the biggest thing was that I liked seeing Pike being able to be his bold self and simultaneously empathetic and break some rules with the sincere conviction that he was doing the right thing that would help the most people. Like that's what I want from Star Trek. So few nitpicks, sure, but overall that was great.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we don't agree too much, because I think these conversations are always more interesting when we disagree. So if you think I'm wrong about anything, feel free to correct me. I know I don't have to tell you that, though. We're pretty good at disagreeing with each other sometimes.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting because I think we may like different things and about some of the scenes coming up, and I'll drop some nitpicks out there.
Well, let's go ahead and get in our episode breakdown. Let's just start off. We got that opening teaser narrated by Una at the very beginning, when she's talking about first contact. And it kind of looks like it's something on modern day Earth. There's people, in some type of military bunker talking about like, oh, there's a UFO. And then we get the reveal of like, oh, these are all aliens. But they're right. Initially we're being shown like, oh yeah, they're similar to us. And there's a Federation, very iconic looking saucer nacelle shaped ship that they are encountering. And we quickly cut from that to Bear Creek, Montana. Get to see Pike and his natural habitat's probably the bridge of a starship, but his secondary habitat is probably like somewhere in the wild American West, and
that's his hearth. His hearth.
Yeah, that's his hearth. Yeah, his Earth. But yeah, I liked him. Doing the, I guess, gentlemanly, manly things like this rustic home. He's cooking breakfast. The morning after him and his friend, but Captain. What was her name?
I missed the name.
Battelle. But yeah, another Starfleet captain. And he's watching the day the Earth stood still. So he likes classic science fiction. I love like those old iconic sci-fi movies like Day of the Earth Stood. It's not black and white, but Forbidden Planet, stuff like that, like the 50s, 60s stuff. I mean, Star Trek's from that era, Twilight Zone, all that stuff. So I loved this. It was just like, oh yeah, this guy is like so cool. Everything about him is cool.
Father, can you throw up Linda Marx's comment about me saying "I told you so"? Just as an alternate phrasing on that. Well, maybe a little bit more Picard. I don't know if that's "I informed you thusly."
That's a Picard way of putting it.
What was interesting is, for all the thing that most people like about Pike from his Discovery appearance was that he was that kind of can-do, almost 60s pilot attitude Trek character. But it's interesting on the show, and that ended up working for people very well. He's not quite there at the start of it. He is a little bit of he's got to get called back into play. And it's a little awkward how like the end of Discovery season 2, it shows him back on the bridge of the Enterprise with like the ship repaired from all of its damage in that battle. We'll talk about that battle again in a moment. And then they did like a couple like short treks that we assume take place after that. So he seemed like he was able to like go back to being captain for a little bit, but I guess at some point he was like, you know what, I really need a break. I can't like shake these visions and stuff I'm having. But our original introduction to Pike in the original series, he was also a guy who like was questioning if he wanted to continue this career. So it's kind of, if you're introducing him to a modern audience, to a lot of people who have probably never watched the original series, it's very much cut from that same cloth. Yeah, kind of an interesting salute to it. And thinking about this for if somebody was a complete new viewer to Trek, it's kind of interesting that this effectively begins on Earth. Very much in something that like a cabin that's going to be familiar to anybody in the 21st century, still looks right. And then it like takes you into space. Literally, you are drawn into space with the crew. It's an interesting way to do Star Trek. Seems a little bit in line with, well, it's not quite what they did with the Kelvin movies, but I'm thinking about Kirk himself, his journey, where they wanted, I think, to show him earthbound and then do some work that got him
stealing
to the stars.
Cars from his stepdad.
Right, but also growing and finding a path to the stars with or at least the guts to give it a shot. That was like the theme. So and with him, well, as we're about to see, Pike kind of has to be pulled back in, but it's about his connection to people, not necessarily a sense of duty in this case.
Yeah, but before we talk about him being pulled back in, I just want to point out, it annoys me sometimes in these newer Star Trek shows when they use such modern day terminology, like when Captain Batel says, "Are you not going to answer the phone? The phone keeps ringing."
Yeah.
But I think it might have just been like a joke because he keeps his communicator next to his phone because he's such like an old school vintage antique guy at heart that like he puts his communicator next to his phone, so it's kind of like having a phone.
Yeah, I took it as kind of like a joke, using a little bit of like, I actually hadn't noticed that there was a literal
there's an old rotary phone. I have an old rotary phone like that in my house, so it's kind of funny, I guess.
They're always going to be cool. It's retro. But
I used to use it when I had a landline. Like I used that to having like a cordless phone like everyone else with caller ID and stuff on it.
But I took it to be like her using kind of old slang and being a little snarky with him.
But I liked her encouragement, like, oh yeah, if you're still here when I get back, like that would be really cool to like come hang out in your cabin again. But I actually hope that you're not here because you belong out there in the stars. And
yeah,
he's not talking to her about like his issue. He'll talk about it to Spock later. So I guess he's bros first when it comes to talking about your emotions. I think they have more of a casual connection here, him and this other captain. But
but at the same time, she seems to know him pretty well. So we'll see. I kind of hope she recurs at some point.
Well, we know he's eventually going to end up with Vina back on Talos 4. That's
sure,
kind of
it wouldn't even need to be as a
pairing.
Right. It doesn't need to be a continued relationship. It could be that they meet at a starbase. There could be romantic sparks or not, but
they're going to keep it casual because it's like the same thing before with like Kirk and Rand. Like they need him to be available for like a new love interest for like the Planet of the Week episodes.
Sure, but I also think that one interesting thing you can do is with a slight serial, some slight serial elements that they'll be folding in, character development and stuff.
Yeah, she could be recurring.
She could be recurring as like just the occasional, like an ex who he bumps into at a starbase every once in a while, who's a friendly ex. That's all it is. They can chat still, and maybe they're sometimes friends with benefits, but more likely they are just friendly exes.
What do you think of Admiral April?
There's not a lot of depth to his character. He was fine. He was he's the guy who seems to convey a fatherly good quality, a little bit like almost like he's Perry White in Superman or whatever, or Superman's dad.
It's kind of like the police chief and like the cop movies. There's a lot of like those tropes, like we're pulling you back in, Pike.
Right, but he's also like he's doing it, I think, because he doesn't seem to be like a guy who's like, he's not pulling him in for some black ops mission. He's like, we need you to save your friend. And, that's I can allow for that.
And I think he admits, like, I don't know what's going on with you. I don't know what classified stuff you were into. He'll learn over the course of the episode. But I think he knows, like, man, Chris, like, you're best when you're in command of a ship. And you're, like, the best we got. So this is for your own good. I'm giving you the push, the encouragement to get back out there.
Right.
Because he does like leave it up to him at the end of the episode to decide.
It's true. I guess we haven't discussed this, but fandom has already discussed it because the one image that we've ever seen, I guess, of Robert April in canon was in the animated series, and he was a white dude, and so there was a little kerfuffle over that. But like they don't actually name him as Robert April in the show, right? The original commander of the Enterprise before Pike. But we assume that that's probably still at least in place.
Did
he ever say the Enterprise was his ship in this?
No, but they say that in the animated series.
Right. But I'm just I was just thinking, if you were watching this without knowing anything about it, you wouldn't know that this guy has a history with the Enterprise or anything.
Well, I think he's going to be recurring. I think he's going to be Pike's boss, and
probably so.
I think that they'll bring that up. I think the way that they're going to play it is that Pike was April's number one.
Yeah, that makes sense. They could do a flashback even to Pike's command of the ship. April's command of the ship.
They'll have to darken Anson's hair because he got like really gray doing season 2 of Discovery.
that technology I think exists, so they should be
Yeah,
okay with
I mean,
that.
like hair color, like that's been around forever. But speaking of that, though, that was one of the weird things to me about April. Wasn't so much his skin color changing, even though I was kind of uncertain how appropriate that is to kind of treat ethnicity as like something like interchangeable between like different actors playing the same character. People seem to be okay with. I mean, some people aren't okay with that, but most people seem to be okay with it. It's
Well, I think if ever a character had the bare minimum appearance, it was April.
I mean, he's pretty prominent in that episode, but it was only one episode.
Yeah.
But what was weird to me is like I thought he seemed like too young to be April, and April's a Commodore in the animated series, so I guess at some point he's gonna get demoted. But they could make that a story point too. They could be like, "Man, Chris, like I took a lot of shit for you this time. They're actually like bumping me down to Commodore because I gave you permission to do this."
By the end of the episode, yeah, like they're talking about like the trouble that he kind of got in.
So if he makes a habit of that, maybe that's the consequence for April. But yeah, not a deep character, but I liked what we got. What I also really liked was the depiction of Vulcan and Vulcan romance handled so well, and they somehow balanced the tightrope. Akiva Goldsman did a beautiful job writing and directing this because he made it both extremely Vulcan and extremely sexy, and that seems like it should be impossible, but he pulled it off. So we were giving him a lot of shit tonight, but we got to give him props for this.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And just to comment, I think it was is it Jill in our audience who is going under the name Where's Ston?
I'll tell you exactly where he is. When Spock bounces off of Vulcan, Ston was somewhere getting a text message from T'Pring, like, "You still up? What are you doing?" Like, we see why she ends up with him and not Spock. Spoilers for the original series if you ain't watched the original series. But
yeah, she is only ever featured in the episode Amok Time, right? But yeah, a memorable character who in that episode, by the time we see her there, is in a rather manipulative kind of place. I think I remember I was reading somewhere that like she was like considered like one of the most hated Trek villains for what she does to Spock, in that as if she was an actual villain.
And a lot of women were jealous too. They're like, "What do you mean like Spock has a fiance?" Like,
oh, interesting.
That's something like I heard about was like in some of the early fandom.
But yeah, I remember like hearing an episode of I think Women at Warp on that discussed that and sort of reappraised her and her having to use sort of Vulcan sort of political machinations and some of their strange
Well, I can
laws.
sympathize with her here with Spock being like, "Oh yeah, like you had like this entire like romantic evening planned and you proposed to me." Like the role reversal, like maybe on Vulcan that's more common, like the woman proposes to the man in these heterosexual relationships. Maybe that's like their tradition. But then Spock just like, "Oh, duty calls. I gotta go." Like, yeah, that would burn a lot of people.
Yeah, and he was even like, "She will understand." I was like, "Oh man,
I don't
know about that." Yeah, that's right. But yes, I liked that scene. And in a minute in the love scene, the cool ocean overlook they've got, which is a dope ass place. Clearly a great place to go to.
Well, they're still at the restaurant or wherever they are, the lounge or whatever it is. The little things like Spock calling it like this is the anniversary of our first courtship event. Like, oh, it's like the anniversary of their first date, but they got to say it weird like that because Vulcan reasons. And then it is like I guess a kind of intense kiss, but not like not something that would freak people out if you did it in public. And just like that server being like, I have to ask you to do that elsewhere.
That was the equivalent of dry humping in a restaurant.
Yeah, it was just like on Vulcan, like this is outrageous what they're doing.
Yeah, I like that, and I will say it's one of many instances of humor in this episode that's part of the endearing thing. That was a big part of the original series of Trek, and I think tapping into that was very, very smart of them.
And these environments are so beautiful. I forget that they're doing all this with the AR wall until I'm like taking notes on these episodes and like having to think about it a little bit more like critically and stuff. It's like the first time I watched these though, like it doesn't even occur to me. I just buy into all the visuals. But yeah, they're using that AR wall very well. I think Discovery Season 4 did Strange New Worlds a huge favor in being the first Star Trek show to experiment with that, and they've learned from that. Because Disco even got better towards the end of Season 4. They got better with the AR wall. And Strange New Worlds, like, they're just out the gates. They're pros with that technology, it looks like.
Yeah, there's one, just no question in this episode of the sort of believability of any given setting in it.
My only complaint with the Vulcan stuff is Ethan Peck's chest is not hairy enough. Leonard Nimoy, pretty hairy dude. So I guess he got like he's more toned, he's more muscular. But I guess he like waxed his chest for the big night with T'Pring.
Yeah, let's find a canonical explanation for it.
But when he gets like the call from Pike, and Pike is like, "Spock, are you naked? What's going on?" This made me love the T'Pring actor. Gia Sandhu, I believe is her name. I've never seen her in anything else, but she is such a good Vulcan actor here when she's like, no, he was about to be. It was a special night. But like the way that she says that just like barely puts like a little bit of like sting on it, like a tiny like little bit of emotion on it. Mm-hmm. It was like perfect Vulcan acting because they have they experience these emotions, they just suppress them. And you could see the emotion clearly conveyed, like breaking through the suppression, and it was very nuanced but very clear, read very clear.
Fatheree, could you throw up Stress-Free K's comment? Stress-Free K is very pleased with Spock's new chest.
I'm sure a lot of audience members are. So
legit, cool. Also the scene where they're like, I think they were right before Pike calls, where they're very close to each other, and I think they're looking out over the waters and talking. They both have small smiles, and we anybody who's watched Trek for any length of time knows that Vulcans have emotions. Of course, just don't reveal them so much. But I like that those moments when they do, and I think that's a perfectly legit time to allow for it.
And Spock talking about like, oh, he's seen like all these crazy things like the liquid mercury oceans of Ceylon, but T'Pring, she even here like she wants him to be more focused on being at home and not Starfleet. When she says Vulcan has more to offer than all those other places, and that's what he's like, oh, why don't you show me? And that's when they start getting sexy, but. You can definitely see like she is not going to be happy with his Starfleet career, and it is kind of questionable. Like, does this fit into the continuity of what's been established? With I think in a mock time they even say like Spock says like, we haven't spoken since I was 8 years old or something like that. But I like what they're doing here so much, and I'm guessing that by the end of the show they're going to try to explain some of this stuff. But
does this mean that we're roughly 7 years out from a mock time? Because that's how Ponfar works.
Yeah, we're like a year before when he should be having a Ponfar, I think.
Yeah, maybe like
this is in 59. He should be having one in 60.
Right, it's just slightly off.
But this is going by Dorothy Fontana rules of like, oh yeah, Vulcans can mate more often if they want to, but they have to once every 7 years.
Right.
That's all she explained it, and she kind of wrote the book on Spock, so I'll defer to the late Dorothy Fontana. Let's talk about the Enterprise, though. Somehow Spock beat Pike back to the Enterprise. I'm not sure how that happened, but
he had to. He was stuck on Earth. Yeah, shaving took a while. You know what? I jokingly I was thinking. Pike is like a millennial or a Zoomer. He's on his phone while they're flying up to the Enterprise and not noticing its grandeur.
Here's another thing that they're doing kind of loosey-goosey with continuity stuff. And again, like I think that it'll be easy to explain all this stuff in the end. But the Gorn, they clearly like want to have the Gorn in some form in the show. So there's unconfirmed reports of the species, the Gorn. There's not been like any official first contact. I think they're going to try to save that for Arena, but still kind of like show the Gorn in this show. And I think if they are playing a little loosey-goosey with some of the continuity and doing things that are, harder to explain, but as long as it's good, as long as what you're doing is good, I think audiences, at least for me, I'll be forgiving of it, and I'll go along with it. I like the Vulcan stuff so much. I'm glad that they did that. I think the Gorn stuff here has a lot of cool potential, so we'll see where that goes. And we'll talk about that with Leon more later when we get her backstory. But yeah, great shots of the Enterprise. I don't know why they shuttled him up there to beam him in. Like they could just beamed him up from Earth. But
And it's kind of
okay.
funny. I can, here's the one thing I can say, and that maybe this feels like it could have been in a cutscene, is he feels like the kind of guy who'd be old school enough he'd want to do a flyby on it before beaming over.
Inspect like the new hull plating or something.
Yeah, and ironically, I actually liked that he wasn't. This wasn't quite the traditional awe-inspiring for like it looked cool. Don't get me wrong, but they didn't do a big to do about it, and not that big a to do. And I think because we know that Pike is not supposed to be fully in the game yet, right? He's not. He doesn't have that headspace quite going on.
He looked hesitant when he was approaching the ship.
Right, and so it fits the thematic of his character arc.
They quickly mentioned Michael Burnham. They were just like, "I miss her." Yeah, me too, and that's it.
I kind of liked that. Something to I like a good twist of the knife of anybody who's still, some kind of weirdo conspiracy theorist that this is the Kelvin timeline or whatever. But also, yeah, I also like connections between the shows. It doesn't have to be a long conversation, a quick mention like that. So, you don't need a long convo because if this is somebody's first episode of Trek, all they need to know is Spock had a sister. Maybe be curious about it. Maybe you look into Discovery. Maybe you don't. But it clearly indicates that these people have a shared history. Pike and Spock have had shared events together and know each other.
Yeah, and it kind of more like cements their friendship beyond just captain and science officer, that it kind of justifies their conversation later where Pike opens up. They showed us this first bridge scene at Star Trek Mission Chicago, and one of the things like they announced before they showed it to us, because they're talking about like, number one's gone, we have this new first officer with Leon. One of the things they told us like immediately is like, Rebecca Romaine's not going anywhere, don't panic. I love how they they got out in front of that before they even showed it to us, because they knew how fans react to like every little detail like that.
Yep, they were right too.
But we meet the ladies on the bridge. We get the Leon Noonien Singh character that we'll learn a little bit more about later, but she's kind of still remains mysterious by the end of the episode. Ortega's our helms person, and then Cadet Uhura on the communication officer station.
Yep, sporting the classic communication earpiece. I forget what you call it.
Yeah, and I didn't know if I liked this bridge redesign more than how it looked in Discovery Season 2, because I really liked the way it looked in Discovery Season 2, and I was like, did they really need to change it? Everyone seems to like it more, but do I like it more? After spending one episode, I love all these sets. I am totally in love with them. I love the John Eves redesign of the Enterprise. I love all the interiors. These uniforms have grown on me.
They look really good. I like to try to not notice the little patterns in making up the textured parts, because that seems like a bit much to me still. But the overall look of it, really good.
This is when we get Pike still having those weird visions, and he gets the ship off to warp. We have this cool little montage of seeing different sets that we don't get to explore in this episode, just to look forward to in the future. But then Pike's having his flashbacks to his, or I guess they're flash forwards. He's having flash forwards of what he knows will be his fate, and that's when Spock comes to comfort him.
Pretty horrific. Like they played it pretty ghastly.
You could say that the scene borrows a lot from Star Trek Beyond, Kirk and McCoy on Kirk's birthday. But Star Trek Beyond, it was actually taking, kind of something from the original series when they did that. So this feels more like going back to the cage, to Boyce and Pike. People tell their bartender things they'll never tell their doctor, kind of thing. But here it's with Spock.
Yeah, and then, there's so many instances of versions of that. Picard and Riker kind of having a heart-to-heart, or Picard and Troy, or
I think it would be like Picard and Guinan.
I mean, I guess but any given person, that the captain opens up to, kind of, there's these intimate scenes are kind of a staple, I would guess, of most Treks.
But I guess the cool thing here is that Pike does tell Spock, yes, I had this vision. I know it. They clarify it might not be the end of my life, but it's the end of my life is me. Which I've heard some people say that's kind of weird. He considers being disabled the same thing as being
right.
dead. But I think it's just I mean, I'm not part of that community, so I can't speak for them. But I think a lot of people who suffer, from an accident or some type of medical condition, like they become disabled. I think there probably is like a lot of trauma associated with
Right.
that.
Arguably, Pike hasn't processed the trauma. That's which is the very premise of this episode. But yeah, I hope they will. I'd actually think. Do you know if they've consulted with people who
I
are
don't
disabled?
know. I mean, that doesn't seem like it, but I like Pike's conclusion here that, like, humans aren't supposed to have this kind of knowledge. We're not supposed to know when our life ends, and it's like
Right.
it's really messing me up, man. Like it's hard to exist with.
Spock takes his shot at some pretty solid advice about how it might, how he might be able
There might
to,
be benefits to it,
yeah, to get benefits out of
or
it.
as far as, like, his leadership goes and stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, Spock is encouraging. Um, I guess we should talk about the arrival at Kylie 279, which is a weird planet name to me because I have a sister named Kylie. Though her name is spelled differently. It's the same letters, they're just arranged in a different order. Her name is Kylie instead of Kiley.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's weird that there's two different ways to spell it. But they find the empty ship. There's no one on board, and this was really cool to me, Dave. Let me ask you, what did you think of Leon's debate with Spock, and then Pike having to make a decision, and then we see the result of it?
You know what I think? I think Worf, Worf is watching this episode and he's like, you see, vindicated.
Yeah, the security officer, she's thinking more like the security of the ship. Something fishy is going on. We need to raise shields. Spock being like, no, that might make us look like assholes, and then but Pike ends up agreeing with her, and then she's validated.
Yep. And yeah, no, I liked that scene a lot. Spock was broadly speaking, I like my Treks to them to go in trying to be as peaceful as they can. But she made some good points about like some of the unknowns there. That was cool. I also like that that this 21st century ish planet didn't do serious damage to them. That it was a okay, this could be provoking them, and clearly their world is in turmoil. They'll discover, but they're not in danger of being shot down. Truly,
Yeah.
so it was a good balance of things. Like that's smart. They don't have to be at risk.
She wasn't like full power to the phaser banks. She was like, no, like,
Yeah.
raise shield. So she wasn't
Honestly,
being...
it's a nuance that Worf should have, but they should have written him with that more often early on. He
Well,
could have been aggressive,
I don't know.
but
I don't know if Worf needed that. I think he was nuanced in other ways. I'm
he
fine with
became more
Worf's
nuanced.
hawkishness.
I think it was just that they failed to give him like moments of being where his like cautionary self would be right, and so that was frustrating. The writers seemed to be against him early on, but yeah, no, it was a good scene.
And the way that it happens like so quickly, but yeah, it is like, oh, we're getting kind of like a little bit of a moral conundrum Star Trek classic thing, but it's all self-contained in like this one scene, and then it actually like has one side be right and one side be wrong, and we see the final results in the end. Again, this stuff being like good examples for Star Trek,
Hmm.
for new audiences. And then immediately after that, in their little conference room, they have this. I think this is very well written, also, but they have a explanation of first contact and General Order 1, and how, like, oh, if they have warp, we can go talk to them and see if they want to be in the Federation. If they don't have warp, we can't talk to them. And I thought it was presented in a way where it didn't feel dull to me as like a seasoned Star Trek viewer who knows all this stuff in and out. It didn't feel like dull or sluggish or boring to me, and I also think it would be a brilliant explanation to the virgin audience who's hearing all these concepts for the first time.
Yeah, and that's a tricky thing. I know that Trek broadly has the reputation as the talky show compared with the other Star franchise, being the more actiony one, and but when you're kind of keeping it moving this quick, it's I mean, I don't think that that criticism hits most of the time anyway, but I get it. And I think, yeah, these were pretty quick and to the point conversations, so they didn't drag.
Yeah, good job, Akiva. Well written, well directed.
Yeah.
Dave, what did you think of the introduction of Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel?
I'm gonna just be prurient and say that Nurse Chapel is very hot. First of all, and then I'm going to say that that you know the immediate interaction with Mabenga like accomplished something of what with the convo with Spock about Burnham did, which is to say, okay, immediate history established. We see that Pike is a good guy. He connects with his officers.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And I
for
liked
sure.
Mabenga's vibe. I liked
He's got jokes. He's like, never get
his
the house dressing.
yeah, this is an Enterprise crew that doesn't take itself like they're clearly good at their jobs, but they're not formal all
They're
the
not
time.
miserable.
They're not miserable.
We've
And
had so many
also,
miserable Starfleet officers. It's like
it's true. I also
refreshing.
liked that Chapel seemed to have like a specialty. She was like I forget what sort of a geneticist sort of thing, a specific
Yeah,
thing even
and,
that
and
had to
she's a
do with.
civilian, which was weird. She's like on
I noticed
transfer
that.
from I don't Stanford Morehouse. I guess I thought that was
I
like
don't
two
know what
different
that
colleges, but
I don't know what that's meant to bring to the table.
um,
Um,
it might make some explanations of her being in the original series. It might make some of that original series stuff make more sense. I don't want to like
maybe
go
so.
down that rabbit hole right now, but
But yeah,
I think it might
I
come
thought
up
it was
in future episodes. Actually,
cool to give her a specialty that's almost certainly going to relate to many away team missions,
she makes
and she also
disguises.
yeah, and she also had a bit of a snark herself, joking about them, kind of minimalizing what she does,
Yeah, yeah.
being
Well, if you want to be
reductive about it.
simplistic, yeah, I make
Yeah,
disguises, but there's so much potential there with Chapel. You can do anything because she's very much a blank slate in the original series. Like I've seen the original series and the animated series many times, and the only general things I can tell you about Chapel is that she assists Dr. McCoy. She had a fiance one time, and she really wants to bang Spock, and that's like all there is to her. They never developed her,
yep,
so they kind of have the pass to do whatever they want here. And they do show that she is already like expressing some attraction to Spock.
right. Yeah, that's sure to be a thing, no doubt.
And they kind of hint at Leon having some weird traumatic events that she endured, but also kind of show her toughness when she does the genome treatment without any sedative.
Yeah.
I thought it was
Yeah,
weird
that was kind
when
of neat
Pike.
to
Oh, go
see.
ahead.
I just thought it was neat to see a slightly granular overview of how they do the infiltration, of breaking it down. Like, we're going to give you a sedative to minimize the pain. Then we're going to change your exterior appearance, but it's not going to change your interiors. Just some people might not know that. That's not. I mean, this isn't a common Star Trek explanation for it, but I thought it was a neat idea. Usually they'd probably just say that they had prosthetics or something like that.
They've done genetic alterations becomes a thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess that was like when Troy was a Romulan and stuff like that. Um,
And
yeah,
Cardassians do it a lot too.
it was.
Cardassians will disguise themselves as people
Oh,
genetically.
really? No, that makes sense. That makes sense. But it was a neat thing to see broken down and not, and of course it illuminated her character.
I thought it was weird when Pike said, "Damn the Ramparts, Doctor," because he's like talking to Chapel. It's like, why did you call her Doctor? Like, she's not a doctor till the motion picture. They
Oh,
just and Binga introduced her as a nurse.
yeah, that's probably just a little slip up there. Just something that made it
But
by.
or was that like part of the quote, like "Damn the Ramparts"? I was assuming that was like "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead." But
Yeah, I
or
don't
was he
know.
talking to Mbenga but looking at Chapel? I don't know. It just felt awkward to me. Um, but yeah, I like the role that they've given Chapel. I'll be curious to see how often they do that. These disguise undercover beam downs to planets. But yeah, we've definitely have seen this story before in Star Trek, but not in a long time, not in a while.
What's that? Do you mean?
You make yourself look like an alien and then go like
Oh,
infiltrate,
that
go or
specific,
go
yeah, just that
undercover.
that technique, yeah.
And then sometimes you have to like beam down in like these weird shorts to blend in. Oh, they use the transporter to beam the clothes on them, like they did in Star Trek First Contact, when Picard's like, "Computer, beam us down to Earth, mid 21st century clothing."
Oh yeah,
And they
that's
just
true.
explained the wardrobe change.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Things are a little faster paced on all the modern Trek shows. More quick beam overs when you need stuff to happen. Does Spock have a tattoo there, by the way?
No, that's like the alien markings on their
Ah, okay, okay. I thought
these
I thought they
spots.
were going to indicate Spock had a tattoo, and I was like, wouldn't have quite guessed it, but I could maybe see it. We'll see.
And then I liked
But
Leanne.
that's another instance of humor, by the way. Another bit of lightness.
It was weird, like in a good way. It was kind of like jarring. It kind of like hit home when Pike was asking Spock, like, "Are you familiar with the United States of America?" And Spock is like, "Yes, I am." And both their devastating civil wars. I was like, "Ooh, both they're like, oh yeah, we're about to have like a civil war, I guess, according to the Star Trek timeline." Like,
Yeah, it kind of hurts when Trek's timeline, though fictional, feels unpleasantly close to real possibilities.
yeah, and but I like the critical nature of that. They're like, "Oh yeah, like this planet looks terrible." I was like, "Look at all this turmoil." It's like 21st century United States of America.
Yep. And it's that and like sort of how the rest of this plays out. I'm not going to get too into the similarities, but it reminded me of a Star Trek book that I read in the '80s, liked quite a bit, called Prime Directive. Similar premise. There was like a planet with humanoid type species, roughly 21st century, brink of nuclear war. In that case, it was a little bit more of the Cold War vibe. And it was really good. And it had some of these vibes to it. It's generally a book I would recommend to people.
And they do a pretty good job giving a lot of these people something to do. I don't know if Uhura or Ortega's get much to do. And our engineer Hemmer, he just kind of shows up at the very end. He didn't get anything to do, but they definitely give Leon some cool moments here when she gets their disguises
Love it.
when she's like his neck, pinch his neck, and he's like gesturing to Spock.
Yeah. We occasionally had talked about how Discovery would be kind of vibe a little bit like the Kelvin movies, just as far as like kind of the energy level and kind of the quick decisions. Like, let's do it. Let's jump into
I mean,
this.
I don't even know if I would say like it's like a Kelvin movie. I feel like a lot of Star Trek shows have shown people like thinking on their feet.
Yeah, I guess so. Somehow the slightly
Not
tongue
everything is like the Kelvin movies.
well, when it's slightly tongue in cheek, and that's what makes me think of it. They had a lot of comedy in those movies, even sometimes in more serious scenes, and that's why that's why it made me think of that. But anyway, yes, I like this scenes, her kind of slightly comically asking, and you could like compare it to also something like A Piece of the Action, which had its serious moments, but it was obviously a lot of comedy in that one.
The way that they would do comedy in the original series, though, a lot of times it would be like Kirk kind of making some clever remark to Spock or something. It wasn't so much
right.
like the important actions they were taking.
And I like the slight nod to realism where Spock said, "Oh, kind of like we're lucky, essentially that the Vulcan nerve pinch worked on them,
Yeah,
that they were humanoid enough or close enough in
they shine
physiology."
a light on that.
And I'm like, I would have been fine if they didn't say that because
It works on
they're
everybody.
they're
Like,
humanoid.
it always works.
I get it, but I'm glad they did it. I respect them more for doing it. It made it feel cooler to me.
But if you're watching Star Trek for the first time, you would be like, "Oh, that must be like a thing that like Vulcans can do to people."
Yeah, I bet most people kind of know that just through osmosis from the pop culture. Well, maybe not most people, but
Beastie Boys put it in one of their songs.
but also the Kelvin movies were a huge success. A lot of people saw them, so
That's true.
that kind of reintroduced a whole new generation to the Vulcan neck pinch.
Although that last movie came out 6 years ago, so it's it might be under some younger
All right,
people's
well,
radar
like
at this point.
a 12-year-old kid might not know, but I bet a lot of people do.
No, this is where I kind of wanted to complain about the episode the first time I was watching it, but then it fixes itself for me. But when they kind of do like the silly, cartoony, like chase the alien because they need his DNA for Spock's disguise, and
Yep.
Chapel running around. I know they have like security on the ship, but I guess it is kind of urgent that she grab the guy soon. But I thought that like, man, this guy, like his entire like world perspective should just be like shattered. Like, oh my god, like what? Or, who are these weird people, these creatures that they've taken me to this weird place? But we see later, like, oh yeah, they've already met Una and the crew of that ship. So he might have like this isn't the first time he's met aliens. Like he's already
The initial ice has
crossed
been
that
broken.
river. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, you know what's funny is I had a sort of an issue with the scene for different reasons, which is like I just like it when they take the treat the Prime Directive or General Order 1 as it's here more seriously, and them just kind of like rolling their eyes at somebody waking up in their sick bay who's gonna like see all this shit and have to process it, or they're gonna have to mind wipe them or whatever to keep them from being too big a thing.
I don't think it gets mind wiped because
but it was like potentially like did they know that did Mabenga and Chapel know that these people were folks who
not
already...
at that point, but I mean they know it by the end of the episode. Like they're like
right.
driving the
but
ship
they didn't
around
know
in
it then,
city skies.
And so it should have felt much more serious to them to have somebody wake up on the ship who's from a pre-warp civilization
instead of being like, oh, it's like Delta Scorpio 7, ha ha ha.
Yeah, that was a little too lightweight for me. Although I did laugh and enjoyed the scene where Chapel finally tagged him. That was good comic timing.
And Uhura does get a small chance to shine in the episode here in the turbo lift when we kind of see like the power of communication, like, and it's all done so efficiently. Like, clearly she's been monitoring like their transmissions. Like she's already picked up on like, oh, she knows really
culture.
Like this.
She like started talking baseball basically with the guy and calmed him down. I see in the comments, Fun Will Now Commence was talking about liking that, how she did that too. It was a cool casual little showcase of her ability.
Yeah, and like we can pick up on a lot, like backtrack is on the bridge. That must be like, and tag ball. I guess that's like your quarterback and. I don't know. It's just like it was like weird how they were able to convey so much with so little. Again, like just really strong writing that was impressive. And then the way that they
my request to Akiva Goldsman is just more self-contained shows. That's where you shine, my bro.
Well, it's not up to him. The streaming platforms don't like episodic television. They were
right.
They were
but,
never.
So
given...
I would argue that be that as it may, Trek would have been better served without them being so serial. Obviously, I understand why they would try it, and I don't think you throw it out necessarily. But I think they could get better at it.
They could, but I'm just saying, like they never had that option with Discovery and Picard. They like that option never existed for them on those shows. Like they've admitted to this.
Well, in that case, his writing, then I stand by my comment. His writing is weaker doing that than it is doing this.
But if Strange New Worlds is really popular, maybe we'll get more stuff in this for. I mean, I would like to see them be good at both. But
yeah, we've talked about it many times. Deep Space Nine in particular was really good at juggling it. They had great standalone episodes and great episodes that would build on something from a few episodes before, but kind of organically. Or sometimes I would notice, I've been noticing during the rewatch, things that would reference something from two seasons ago or whatever and suddenly build on it. And it just feels like so much more organic. It's really good.
But even though some of the stuff of chasing the rabbit or whatever they call it is kind of silly, it was shot in a fun way, like when he steps onto the bridge and Chapel's beamed in there with the sickbay transporter, which is it's cool. I like that, and she's there waiting for him, and we get to see like the cute little like first meeting of these two characters we love from the original series of Chapel and Uhura, and they still had like a sense of tension during all this because. The security dudes look like they're ready to like shoot Spock if he doesn't pass this like a eye scanning device security screening.
It's a good suspenseful scene. It was well cut and suspenseful.
Oh, and they give Kyle. I don't know if this is supposed to be like the same Mr. Kyle from the original series because he's Asian now. The headcanon that me and Brian and Starfleet Boy came up with is that this is that Kyle's husband.
Okay.
Transporter Chief Kyle here.
Just another Mr. Kyle.
It's a pretty common name also.
Sure.
But he gets a moment to shine where he's like, oh, I gotta like beam this into someone's eye. Like transporters don't do that, but they're like, we'll make it do that. And I love the way the actor played this, where he looks so like unsure when he's being like, I guess maybe this might work. I hope. Like I don't know. That really sold it. Like the difficulty and uncertainty of it to me.
But also the fact that I like the idea that Starfleet officers are, broadly speaking, have some best of the best skills, and even a person who's unsure of themselves is probably kind of a badass.
Yeah. But yeah, do you have anything else on the infiltration before we get to the?
I was a little creeped out by the scene you've got pulled up where Spock's ear begins to wriggle into place. It was kind of realistic looking, like you saw like little capillary veins or whatever kind of pop into place inside it, and as it wiggled larger.
Yeah, I thought that was good levity, and
Yeah.
again, the part of like why like the goofier, funnier stuff works is it ties into the tension also. Like, yes, it's weird to see this woman's reaction to someone's ear mutating before her eyes, but it's also reminding us, like, oh no, Spock's disguise is going to wear off soon. This is dangerous. The clock is ticking. They got to hurry up and do this.
Yep, and they had a little bit of an elevator music joke, which was a little goofy, but I think I was on board the levity of the series.
It was like
of the show.
Familiar settings to make it easier for the real life audience to understand. We learned that Una and Leon know each other, but we don't know the full story on that until later.
Right.
And there's some action on there as they're trying to escape. They have to like beat some people up to get back to the elevator.
Yeah, when Pike is making his speech later, I almost want somebody to interrupt him, like, wait a minute, didn't you beat up some of our people? He'd be like, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
I was actually happy to see like Pike throw a punch in this episode. I was like, I want to have that. They're like, yeah, sometimes you need a little fisticuffs in Star Trek.
Right. And it wasn't like portrayed super brutally. They just kind of they knocked him out.
And it wasn't like a big, like, huge, like, kung fu battle set piece, which I do like it sometimes when the Star Trek shows do, like, those big physical fights. But, the original series would have done that if they had the choreography, but instead they just had, like, a bunch of, like, double fist punches and judo chops. But and that's cool, too. I like that style. But we finally get some explanation here of what's going on with this planet. They didn't have warp engines. They had warp bombs, and they got that technology from watching the battle at Zahea, where the Discovery went into the future when Michael flew around in the Red Angel suit, and there was a bunch of Kelpian ships and Klingon ships and all kinds of ships. These people were able to observe that and build warp weaponry.
Yeah, and by the way, that premise, which that is revealed early on, but like only clarified here, was one I really liked. This was about them having to take accountability for their own actions, and arguably something done, under the most terrifying of times, that, not a huge screw up on Starfleet's, but it's definitely on their plate as a problem. And I felt like that made it pretty reasonable for Pike to bend some rules to make it right.
And I like that they tie some stuff back into pre-established events, just because I love like the big tapestry of the universe connecting.
I like that too.
But it does seem a little weird to put in your first episode, like, because then like that would be confusing to someone who hasn't seen that, I think.
I guess so, but like, do you really need to know anything more than there was a thing where Starfleet technology just got seen? Like, does it matter that it was from Discovery?
Yeah,
I think it was episode?
People would be like, "Oh, I need to know more about that," because they're talking about like I'm supposed to know that.
And there, it feels almost more like the way when I got into comics and I would read like an issue of Hulk or something, and it would have like or I'd read Spider-Man and there would be like a member of the Avengers in it, and I'd be like, oh, I kind of want to know who these Avengers guys are. Like, it was a kind of neat thing, I think. I guess it'd be cool to hear from some people who it's their first time watching Star Trek. I can't imagine too many people of those people are listening to Tex-Trek, but if anybody knows somebody, or if you're somebody who knows somebody who's it's their first time, man, I'd love to hear how the reaction was.
I liked Pike saying "screw General Order 1" because that's basically what every Starfleet captain says, whether literally or through actions. They say that one way or another at some point during their career. But Una being kind of the pragmatist, giving him someone to bounce off of in that elevator when she's saying like we've interfered enough, we need to get out of here, we can't make these people stop being assholes, we can't make them care about the stars. General Order 1, but Pike makes the decision. He's like, no, screw that, we have a responsibility here to fix this. All of y'all beam up, me and Spock got this.
Mm-hmm.
And then the line, take me to your leader, tying back into him being like the old school science fiction fan. Unlike Picard, who doesn't like science fiction. I like that kind of Picard's like, oh, science fiction, I never did get that. And then Pike is like, oh, I love this old science fiction stuff.
Yep. And it fits because like that, especially that 60s, I mean, literally like that 60s stuff was like the origin of Trek's kind of that sort of humanitarian sci-fi, we really want to fix the world vibe of movies like The Day the Earth Stood Still, which also gave us the theremin, or popularized the theremin as a sci-fi thing, as heard in the introduction to this. It's cool to see them. It's like both a meta acknowledgement of their roots, and it's sort of as like Pike is a little bit more one of us than Picard was. Love Picard, but he always felt aloof, and Pike isn't.
Yeah, like I would rather go hang out with Pike than
100%
than Picard. No offense to
100%.
Jean-Luc, but
yeah, I would love to hang out with Patrick Stewart, but I don't know about Jean-Luc.
They have the meeting with, I guess, like the president lady. They never say like what her title is. She's just like the leader of the government. But I like that Pike tries to be philosophical with her, and he has like that proverb about when elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers, and she's like, I don't care about proverbs, I just care about like having a big stick. So that's when he
because this is the equivalent of a classic Kirk sort of speech. I thought it was important, or like, let's just say I liked that it doesn't immediately quite work out. Like she's like, okay, that's nice words, but we've been fighting these guys forever. They're a problem. They won't listen.
It ain't gonna be that easy. It ain't gonna be that easy for Pike.
Exactly.
And then when he reveals the Enterprise to them, clearly like violating General Order 1. In an alternate timeline, a certain Pike would scold a certain Kirk for doing the same thing in Star Trek Into Darkness. But I like the way that they treat the Enterprise that looks so similar to the old school Matt Jeffries design. They treat it with such like respect and awe and grandeur. And the visuals are outstanding. I'm sure they spent just a ton of money on this being the first episode. They want it to make like a great impression. But everything looks like so sharp and so majestic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, when they say that, when Pike says, it's a little bit of swagger, and honestly, this goes back a bit to the the original series, and that's a little bit of gunboat diplomacy style, to be like, I've got the biggest stick.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, yeah, I don't want them to ever really feel like bullies, but if every once in a while they feel kind of badass.
Well, she was trying to talk like she was hot shit first, so he needed to humble her. He needed to bring her back down.
Right, he had to speak the language that was at the table.
Yeah, all right, you want to talk big sticks? Well, hold up. I got the biggest. We need to talk about like his speechification that kind of wins the day in the end, somewhat conveniently. But before we get to that, we should talk about like his
convo with Leon.
We finally learned some stuff about Leon and her kind of more cynical philosophy of her belief of you not believing you're going to die is what get you killed. He's like, what? And she's like, oh, just something my dad said before like Gorn ate his face off. And it sounds like really terrible. Like, what were they like, cutting people open to eat them or make breeding sacks out of them? Whatever the hell that, like, they like lay eggs inside of a human body. Or
I have to admit, because the original Gorn episode was about sort of this merciful ending with them, I kind of didn't want the Gorn to be that monstrous. I would like the Gorn. There was a really good graphic novel that they did years back, I think, when was it Dark Horse when they had the run, or I mean not Dark Horse but DC. I don't know, but I don't want the Gorns to be too monstrous, even though I want more Gorn stuff. But it sounds like if we see any more Gorn stuff, it may be kind of monstrous, and I'll see what they do with it. Yes, they sounded terrifying.
At least they're respecting the Gorn, but I guess this kind of helps Pike figure out how to balance his his knowledge of his future and how to, how do you um deal with knowing your time is up? Like, do you deny it? Do you accept it? And Leon saying like, yeah, like people, they stay in denial. I never denied it, and that's why I was able to survive and became the lone survivor.
Right, and he realizes what he can do with himself, which is to say, take his future thing as kind of a way to make the present more immediate, like, and try and be better in the moment, and to use that to try and show that to the people of this planet, that
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah, what he tells them, he calls it the power of possibility. Until our last moment, the future is what we make it.
Right. He literally shows them essentially imagery of Earth's warlike past, their nukes going off and stuff, and talks about like the absolute devastation, all the species lost. I thought that was an interesting way to put it, not just in human lives, but in species lost. Was kind of I thought a neat sort of more future way to think about it.
This is something I think Gene Roddenberry would really approve of too. Depending on what decade you talk to him and where he was with his drug and alcohol abuse or his strokes he kept having. But Roddenberry is kind of an inconsistent thing. I love him, but he's kind of inconsistent over the decades. He seemed to have like different concerns, different priorities for what he wanted with Star Trek in different decades. But overall, Mike Okuda put out a tweet recently that I thought was like really appropriate. He said, Roddenberry's Star Trek doesn't promise you a utopian future. It doesn't promise you everything's going to work out great. It just shows you that it can. And it's also very often a cautionary tale and shows how bad things can be if we don't work together, if we don't try to make the better future and do the right thing to ensure that future. And it's spelled out very clearly here. You might say too clearly. You might say like it's a little too on the nose, but I think it's within that Star Trek tradition that we come to
yeah,
like.
well, like 60s Trek did, directly sometimes commenting on their times, as some people in our comments are noting, they did show clips of the attempted coup on the Capitol from January 6th.
Yeah.
As part of essentially the pathway to destruction.
Yeah,
so
he shows a bunch of repurposed footage from Discovery and Picard of like, this is how great my world is now, but it used to be pretty terrible. And the 21st century we had it all, and then we squandered it. There was an American Civil War, there was a eugenics war, and then eventually World War III. And the footage here, it is like a lot of like real world stuff that is definitely hammering it in the like we're talking about the United States right now and how devastating that could be to not just this country but to the entire world. But then the footage of the nuclear bombs like exploding in Washington D.C. and New York and Paris. And one of those explosion shots where you see like the shockwave just like knocking over skyscrapers and stuff. All that stuff looked really good, really realistic, and yeah, very disturbing as a result of that.
Yeah, the exterior shots from space of the whole planet going up too was pretty sobering. And you always you could sort of cynically wonder. It's like, okay, are these people going to be shocked in the moment and then like a week later go back to their warmongering? But this is sort of the nature of episodic Trek TV.
Well, they tell us that doesn't happen because we get that convenient montage.
There's a montage. Yeah, you do see, at least, I mean, still, like, you don't know in the years to come if this will all keep. But I actually think it'd be kind of, by the way, neat to do something TOS didn't do, which is follow up on this stuff occasionally. Have some wrinkle show up, but something, not an insurmountable problem, but something that they can revisit to show that problems, that these guys will stay with a problem until they fix it. But yes, I thought it was given that that's kind of a tough thing to show, like a whole planet sort of coming to a sobering conclusion that will hopefully better them. They did a really good job on it.
And Pike sold the devastation of World War III pretty well, I think. When maybe like even like 600,000 animal species extinct, like that seems like a lot of animals. And The 30% of humans, that's like billions of people, but they've established that in I think First Contact. I think Riker says 3 billion died in World War III.
I think the 600,000, that sort of makes sense to me because there's so many species on Earth.
Well, no, the
It's
humpbacks.
crazy.
The humpbacks are screwed. The
Yeah,
humpback
well.
whales, they ain't making it. Ricardo didn't save them. Damn it, Ricardo. But yeah, the montage did seem like, oh yeah, this is like kind of, it's kind of nice and convenient, but it was satisfying. It's like we were saying when we were talking about Picard. It's like, yeah, this contrived stuff works if you find it satisfying.
I mean, it is baked into the premise here. So I think that if you find, like, I guess I can call it contrived here, but I also think that it is part of the DNA of this show, is that the solutions will kind of, quickly work or quickly unfold, so that but they are, it is not about lingering with them. And and unless they do it poorly, I don't think that's ever going to really be an issue for me. Hopefully they won't do it poorly.
I did have one issue with all of this stuff. I thought it was weird when he's like, so these are your options. You can go to war or you can join the Federation. I'm like, you think these people are like ready for like Federation membership? Like, are they gonna like pass like the application requirements?
Well, I do think like this was clearly like an unprecedented situation. I think
Yeah.
Spock said no one had ever made a warp bomb first.
It'd be like if you made a nuke before you understood particle physics.
Right. So I think that's why he's probably angling. He's putting now. He put pressure on Starfleet to have to figure out what to do with this, and I suspect that they, would find some sort of provisional membership that is meant, because this is a unique situation that they do have some responsibility for, so that they will find a way to make it work. Which I like that idea. Find a way to make it work.
Let's talk about the ending and the Starbase 1 stuff. That we actually saw Starbase 1 in season 1 of Discovery, but it was all like messed up and taken over by Klingons. It had like Klingon graffiti on it. The Klingons like taking it over during the war. So I like seeing it now with all these nice pods full of plant life, full of force. I think Starbase 1 might be a recurring location whenever they need to like go back to the
they
base,
put a lot of
come
work.
here.
It's a place I'd like to go. I'd like to visit.
Discovery seasons 3 and 4 got a lot of mileage out of their Starfleet HQ starbase, so this might be like our 23rd century version of that. But yeah, we see April talk about like, okay, we were able to loophole all of this. Like, you're fine. You're not going to get in any trouble because Starfleet had to deny that battle ever happened because all the Discovery is classified. So you're good. But you need to explain little things like that. Like, those are the things, like, if they go unexplained, like, a lot of fans pull their hair out and freak out on the internet and complain about, like, this doesn't make any sense. So, good job on keeping that stuff nice and tidy. And then another thing I really loved in this episode was when Pike and Leanne are talking. He talks about, like, that story of, like, the seeds that were sent into space and that growth is possible in space. But he had, like, some issues with Leon, like, they kind of clashed a little bit, and I love his solution to it, where he's like, you know what, you're kind of an asshole, but you're a good officer. Like, why don't you just come like work on the Enterprise and serve as part of my crew? Because he's kind of like, I can help this person become a better person. I can help them like get over some of their cynicism and their like trust issues, instead of like being like resentful or angry that she didn't like fall in line and obey orders. Instead, he's like, I can help this person. And she's a competent officer. Like he wants to acknowledge like her good traits also. So I thought that was really cool. I loved that.
Absolutely.
But do you have anything else before we move on?
I don't think so. I cheated and I watched the preview for the season, which I normally don't. But I was kind of excited and it looks cool to me. I'm not gonna blab anything about that. But
I think most people probably watch those. I'm the weird one who doesn't watch.
And I don't. I normally don't, but this was actually, the weird thing is sometimes I'll watch them if I'm kind of losing interest in something, because I'll be like, whatever. But in this case, I watched it because I was excited for it. So, but it looks good to me. I mean, like, what a good start this was. So many things they're doing right. Most of my complaints are minor. it has all the earmarks of a show that's probably that could end up my favorite of basically everything since Discovery started.
And we have the two latecomers of the show, two
Oh,
new
right.
characters on the ship with Lieutenant Sam Kirk, and then with Hemmer, our chief engineer. We'll get to see more of them in the episodes to come. Just full disclosure, I didn't watch the trailer, but I have access to additional episodes that Paramount Plus has given me. I'm not going to watch ahead though. I have seen the next episode, but moving forward, I'm going to wait until I talk about an episode before I watch the next one, because I want to be the same place as the audience at large. But yeah, I enjoy the next one, and I'm excited to talk about it with all of y'all next week. And if that's all we got, I need to go into some of these Gorn eggs we have.
Well, Fatheree, let me ask. Somebody was cast as Kirk. Is George Kirk the Kirk? Is that the actor, or is like
Sam Kirk? No, this is a different actor.
Okay,
this isn't Paul Wesley who's going to.
So we are going to see James T. Kirk as well
in season 2.
Okay, but that's like kind of a big thing having Sam Kirk on there, which is, by the way, isn't it George Samuel Kirk? I think.
Yeah, but they call him Sam Kirk in this. But in the original series, Kirk says only I call him Sam.
Right.
But Pike does too, apparently.
I'm going to call him Sam too. And we know that this guy is destined to die in Operation Annihilate.
Yep.
Did we ever I thought he was just a colonist. I guess I didn't know that he was like a Starfleet officer.
Yeah, no one knew that because that was never a thing until now. But,
so how do you feel about it? Yay or nay?
It's the same thing as T'Pring or the Gorn. I'm like, yeah, it's a little loosey goosey, but doesn't fit perfect. It's kind of a little bit like trying to put like a not totally like a square peg in a round hole, but like
it's a little bit of that. It's a small world.
It's a little bit of a different shape, and you're kind of having to like put a little bit of effort to jam it in there. But if you like what they're doing, it's kind of easy to go along with it anyways.
Yeah,
and it's not like totally like world breaking or anything. But yeah, it is a little small worldish. That is a legitimate complaint that like, oh, so Spock knew Sam Kirk also, like Spock and Uhura knew this guy. They run into his corpse in Operation Annihilate.
I'm curious to see what they want to do with him, because I mean, other than making that so that famously Operation Annihilate didn't have much time to linger on his death, and never affected any future episodes. I wonder if this is a bit of a retroactively giving him a little bit more dignity and depth.
It's something I said a long time ago. I said, like, in Strange New Worlds, people were talking about, like, is Kirk going to show up? I said this, like, years ago. If they ever do, like, that Pike show on the Enterprise, I was like, you know what? I don't want James Kirk. I want Sam Kirk. I want his brother, and I want him to have a mustache. They fucking did it. They did it, Dave.
I looked at an image of that. What did Kirk play him in that?
Shatner played him.
Shatner played him with a mustache,
yes,
or fake mustache or whatever when they find his body. So this is mustachioed Shatner replacement. Yeah, I like it. I think it's fun. Good call on that powerful prediction, Fatheree.
But yeah, and I'll talk about that more in the Gorn eggs and all of our Easter eggs, in jokes, and continuity connections that I thought were worth mentioning. So I'm just going to talk about those now. But the first one I should talk about, just like that card they threw up at the end of the episode for April Nasaphora. We love you. That's what it said. She was a producer in some Berman-era Star Trek shows. She was a producer on Discovery and Picard. And she passed away, I think, last year from a battle with cancer. So they actually had a tribute to her in Discovery Season 4 also. And she's credited as a producer on this show, so she had some involvement. I think she worked in like the post-production side of things. I don't really know too much about her, but yeah, her name appears in credits in a bunch of Star Trek. Also, at the very beginning of the episode, we get like an image of the USS Archer. That's clearly named after Captain Jonathan Archer on Star Trek Enterprise, and the design kind of looks like the Saladin class or Hermes class from the old tech manual, the small saucer with a single warp nacelle. Kind of weird that there's a little 3-person ship, but I guess it makes sense if it's just like a little one-deck saucer. It's not a huge ship. Also, the day the Earth stood still, it was in Star Trek before. I saw in our live audience, Dan CO was thinking that might have been in Star Trek Enterprise, but yes, that was in the episode Cogenitor, I believe. That was one of Trip's movie night movies. He was always showing old classic movies on the NX-01 Enterprise.
Nice.
Dave pointed out that this is not the first appearance of Robert April. He was originally introduced in the animated series in the episode The Counter Clock Incident. He's often depicted or described as looking like Gene Roddenberry, how Gene Roddenberry looks in real life. But they went a different route with the live action Robert April. So a lot of people are just headcanoning that, they got a lot of colors wrong on the animated series sometimes, so it's just an animation error is one way of looking at it. Yeah, it would be hard if they limited their casting to be like, we got to match up to like this cartoon and get someone who looks and sounds like this. On planet Vulcan, not only do we have like a Vasquez rock in the backgrounds, but there's mention of Pasal's lute recording. So we have some Vulcan lute music. And also when T'Pring says gallivanting, that made me think of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, when Kirk says gallivanting around doesn't he say gallivanting around the galaxy is a game for the young?
Yep, he might say cosmos, but yes.
Around the cosmos. The shuttle that Pike takes to the Enterprise is named Stamets, probably after the Discovery character Paul Stamets, but it could be the real-life scientist Paul Stamets, also the real-life mushroom expert, mycologist. And mention of both Gorn and we got to talk about Leon's last name, Noonien Singh. Those both have ties back to the original series. The people on Kylie were shooting plasma torpedoes at the Enterprise. Plasma torpedoes were first introduced in Balance of Terror. That's actually what the Romulans were using. It was a devastating weapon then. Here they're talking about like, this is old primitive 21st century technology. But
yeah, I kind of thought that was weird that they said it was like a 21st century kind of weapon.
I thought it was weird. Like, I'm in the 21st century. We don't have plasma weapons. Those sound badass. Like in Picard, though, the star chart is loaded with a bunch of established planets. The thing I want to call attention to is that it's interesting to me that it has Cardassia Prime and Bajor on here. Like, I didn't know if the Federation knew about those planets during the time of the original series. It makes me wonder if they've actually had first contact with like Cardassians or Bajorans, or if it's just we know about these planets, we haven't gone over there and met anybody yet.
Yeah, that makes some sense. You know, I actually like the idea of sort of slightly longer timelines for some of that stuff. It just feels a little more real.
Yeah, and so these star charts have gotten things wrong before. Sometimes they put in planets that like haven't been discovered yet, and
sure.
So I would kind of treat this as kind of take it with a grain of salt.
For sure.
When they have that little flashback to the Discovery battle in season 2 of Discovery, from the episode Such Sweet Sorrow, Part 2. They're playing some of the Star Trek Discovery score, some of Jeff Russo's Discovery score. The composer of Strange New Worlds, Nami Malamud, who I thought did a great job in this episode of having like this big dramatic music that felt very reminiscent of the original series. But yeah, she incorporated some of Jeff Russo's Discovery music there. And then, when we get the introduction of George Kirk, there's a little bit of a TOS riff going on there. So I thought that was cool. And George Kirk, like we were saying, was from Operation Annihilate. So that's everything I got there. But yeah, if you were joining us...
sorry to interrupt, but just real quick, somebody mentioned this earlier, and it's one we might have to research because I didn't look into it. I didn't catch who said it. But he said that the elevator music was like a jazz lounge version of the Discovery theme.
Ooh, could be. I mean, I don't see any reason why like that music couldn't exist in universe somewhere.
Well, I mean, I would imagine it was more of an in-joke for fans than an intentional thing. But yeah, just something that we might want to look into, a possible Easter egg, not verified yet.
Okay. Yeah, to be determined on that. But good catch, whoever mentioned that. If that's real, we don't want to give you flowers just yet. But
yeah, we'll get back to you.
But yeah, but if you were checking us out for the first time, we do this show every Friday night. Normally, we're only talking about one episode. Normally, it's still a long show. We typically run about an hour and a half because we go so detailed. But you can also listen to us as a podcast wherever you get your podcast. But we're going to be doing this every week for all 10 episodes of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1. And if you're catching us live right now on Friday night, all y'all need to go head on over to the Starfleet Boy After Dark channel, because they're going to be having a lot of fun over there with Starfleet Boy and friends. I think they're talking about the new MCU movie, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. If you want to hear people talk about that and give their reactions to that movie, you can go check that out. Otherwise, though, we will be back next week. And until then, as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek, and follow Fatheree on Twitter at txtrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.